Betrayed warrior Colin Hall fights a losing battle against demons in humanity's last burning fortress, as a massive, fiery explosion tears through the crumbling stone walls around him, leaving him battered, bruised, and desperately struggling to draw his very next breath. Before a towering, flame-clad demonic fiend steps through the smoke to confront him, grinning maliciously while calling out the exhausted warrior's name with absolute confidence, forcing the exhausted warrior to stand his ground despite his rapidly failing body. His glare remains sharp, refusing to show any fear to this monster, even as the demon raises a blazing sword to end their final struggle, offering a twisted, mocking mercy by letting Colin choose his own demise, which triggers a flood of bitter memories about how everything fell apart, wondering if this pathetic defeat is truly the end of his journey. Just 1 year ago, the demon race launched a sudden, brutal invasion, quickly storming human cities and leaving a trail of absolute fiery devastation, where ordinary soldiers fought bravely but fell helplessly against terrifying, magic-using monsters. Since humanity's own magical power was kept strictly under lock and key, reserved solely as a privilege for arrogant nobles boasting about their superior bloodlines, these self-proclaimed elites gathered to cast their highly praised, exclusive magical spells, believing they were the destined heroes who would easily save all of humanity, unleashing a devastating rain of purple fireballs down upon the invading forces, only to realize their proud magic barely scratched the menacing demonic horde. To the demon horde, the highly praised magic of the human elites was nothing but child's play, as they retaliated by launching a massive, devastating fireball straight down onto the arrogant nobles, leaving the self-proclaimed heroes completely frozen in absolute terror as their defenses crumbled instantly, which led to the brutal destruction of entire cities and the tragic loss of innocent lives. While brave soldiers fell in battle, their sacrifices rendered completely meaningless by the overwhelming demonic threat. Colin bitterly regrets not finding a mysterious, glowing, magical grimoire much earlier in his journey, believing that this ancient book could have altered the tragic fate of his fallen comrades. But back in the harsh reality, the mocking demon asks how he wants to die. This monster casually offers to sever his limbs or burn him to ashes like the others, prompting our battered protagonist to quietly resolve to unleash his final, desperate trump card, catching the arrogant fiend off guard with his sudden change in demeanor and quiet confidence, as Colin firmly grips his sword, refusing to let his story end in this place, telling the beast to shut up before launching himself forward with a fierce battle cry, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks as the demon easily blocks the strike. Though Colin pours every ounce of his remaining strength into this desperate, final assault, slipping past the flaming blade with an incredibly swift and unexpected maneuver, he swings his blade with absolute precision, aiming directly for the monster's exposed chest, landing a clean, surprising blow that actually forces a gasp of shock from the fiend. Unfortunately, the demon quickly recovers and sneers at the futility of mere human swordsmanship, laughing maliciously as he prepares to show Colin the true terrifying power of a god's blessing. This demon staggers back in absolute shock, clutching his freshly wounded chest as black blood splatters. He screams in pure disbelief, unable to accept that a mere human actually managed to wound him. Colin quietly agrees, knowing that standard martial arts would never be enough to pierce that thick hide. But this desperate strike is powered by something far more sinister than basic physical strength, revealing that he sacrificed his own soul and life force to activate a forbidden sword technique. Charging forward once again, our protagonist throws himself into the fray with zero regard for his survival, weaving through lethal strikes as their weapons clash in a blinding display of speed. And though the monster thinks he spotted an opening, Colin's glowing eye reveals a hidden trap. With a sudden, brutal slash, he completely severs the demon's arm, sending it flying through the air, leaving the arrogant beast sweating in agony as he realizes he seriously underestimated this dying warrior. Yet the fiend quickly recovers, using his remaining hand to catch Colin's blade mid-swing, mocking our hero by pointing out that a surprise attack might have actually finished the job. Suddenly, hairline fractures begin to spiderweb across the glowing metal, catching Colin completely off guard, as the demon's crushing grip easily shatters the blade like cheap glass right before his eyes, declaring with a cruel smirk that the human's ultimate effort still fell just one step short, before unleashing a devastating counterattack that sends our battered protagonist flying backward through the air. A massive explosion rocks the fortress, leveling the surrounding stone structures in a flash of light, where Colin now lies motionless on the cold ground, his broken body pushed past its absolute limit. He bitterly realizes that even sacrificing his soul wasn't enough to save humanity from this nightmare, as the one-armed demon lifts him by the throat, sealing the tragic fate of this final battle. As his vision fades, Colin silently apologizes to the fallen comrades he failed to protect, while the mocking demon grins, savoring his absolute victory over the dying human warrior, holding him up by the throat as his life force slowly drains away. But his dripping blood lands directly onto the ancient forgotten grimoire lying below, triggering a sudden blinding surge of magical energy that awakens the dormant book. Suddenly, Colin's eyes snap open as he finds himself in a completely different place, clutching his throat in disbelief as he realizes he is somehow still breathing. Standing in a vast glowing blue void with no sign of the burning fortress, a mysterious dark voice echoes through the empty space, calling out his full name. prompting our confused protagonist to immediately spin around and demand to know who's there. His eyes widen in pure shock as a familiar object materializes before him, revealing the legendary glowing magic tome floating peacefully in the center of the void, which is the exact same artifact he bitterly regretted not finding earlier in his journey. This floating dark orb explains that his spilled blood has finally awakened its power, offering him a miraculous chance to travel back in time and redo everything. Clenching his fist, Colin processes this unbelievable opportunity to rewrite his entire destiny, his gaze hardening with a fierce newfound resolve to save his fallen allies, knowing he could never ask for a better chance to exact his ultimate revenge. Now the ancient grimoire begins to rapidly flip open, promising to teach him forbidden magic, as glowing pages swirl around him, ready to send him back to the very beginning. As the ancient grimoire's pages swirl around him in a blinding vortex of light, a mysterious voice echoes through the rift, calling out his name to initiate the transition. And with a sudden flash, Colin's consciousness is forcefully pulled back through the fabric of time, leaving his old broken body behind as he prepares to forge an entirely different future. Suddenly, the deafening roar of a bloodthirsty crowd snaps him back to reality, forcing our disoriented protagonist to blink in confusion at his suddenly unblemished skin. He finds himself standing in the center of a dusty, sun-drenched slave arena, clutching a cheap iron sword and a wooden shield that feel incredibly light. Facing him is a towering masked executioner known to the bloodthirsty crowd as the Butcher, which makes Colin realize he's been sent back to his days as a gladiator. High above the sandy floor, wealthy spectators cheer wildly for the impending slaughter, led by Viscount Slaith, a notoriously cruel noble who views commoners as mere playthings. This arrogant aristocrat sneers from his private box, muttering about the uselessness of the lowborn, while the monstrous executioner slowly raises a massive spiked iron hammer to crush his opponent. Colin quietly listens to the noble's mocking words, his gaze darkening with cold fury. But before he can react, the giant swings his weapon down with bone-shattering force, sending a massive cloud of dust and debris exploding outward across the arena floor. This bloodthirsty audience erupts into absolute frenzy, chanting the executioner's name in unison, as Slaith grins maliciously, fully expecting to see another pathetic slave crushed to pieces. Yet amidst the swirling dust, the true battle for Colin's destiny has only just begun. Viscount Slaith's smug grin instantly vanishes as he stares down at the dusty arena floor, where his prized executioner is suddenly brought to his knees by a single, effortless parry. Underneath his tattered mask, the giant gasps in sheer disbelief at this slave's impossible strength, while Colin casually balances on the massive iron hammer, realizing his regression is indeed real. Suddenly, a glowing blue magic circle manifests directly over his hand, pulsing with ancient power, confirming that the legendary grimoire has successfully fused with his soul for this second chance. With a surge of newfound magical energy, he leaps forward to deliver a devastating strike, aiming to rewrite his tragic past, starting with a very monster standing before him, leaving the terrified executioner completely helpless as a blinding flash of steel cuts through the air. Blood splatters across the dirt as Colin executes a flawless, lethal slash with absolute precision, landing gracefully on the ground while the towering giant collapses lifelessly behind him, his glowing blue eye burning with a cold resolve to prevent humanity's ultimate demise. This bloodthirsty crowd erupts into a deafening roar, completely stunned by the slave's miraculous victory. Yet our protagonist knows he must quickly master the grimoire's forbidden spells to survive, though climbing out of this wretched slave status is his immediate, most crucial hurdle. Scanning the luxurious VIP balconies, his eyes lock onto the powerful elites ruling the territory, specifically targeting Marcus Darius Hall, the influential lord he desperately needs to manipulate, realizing that earning this man's attention much earlier will drastically alter his entire destiny. He recalls the words of a desperate old man who bet everything on his victory, trusting this low-born gladiator to shatter the arrogant noble's absolute control over their lives. An old handler hands Colin a bag of coins, pleading that he cannot disobey Lord Slaith's orders, begging our protagonist to throw the match because his own life is on the line. But Colin knows Slaith is just trying to sacrifice him to curry favor with the visiting nobles. Instead of throwing the fight, he decides to use this rigged game to catch the Marquis's eye, boldly calling out for his next opponent while standing tall in the center of the arena. This unexpected defiance immediately infuriates the wealthy spectators who bet heavily against the slave. Angry nobles turn on Slaith, demanding to know why his prized executioner was defeated so easily, complaining about the massive fortunes they just lost on what was supposed to be a sure thing, forcing the panicked Viscount to desperately claim that this upset is actually part of his master plan. Meanwhile, Marquis Darius Hall watches from his high balcony, asking his aide for an honest evaluation, who admits that Colin's flawless execution would put even the Empire's elite knights to shame, leaving the Marquis thoroughly impressed by the sheer talent of his territory's finest slave warrior. Back in the dirt, Colin easily outmaneuvers another heavily armored opponent with effortless grace, while Slaith tries to convince his guests that a little hope makes the crowd spend more money, reassuring the furious aristocrats that the final outcome is still completely under his control, secretly plotting to have Colin brutally torn to shreds in the very next round of the tournament. However, our hero defies all expectations once again, standing victorious over yet another fallen gladiator, which leaves the scheming Viscount completely frozen in absolute wide-eyed disbelief as his plans crumble, as the outraged nobles surround Slaith, accusing him of cheating them out of their gold. leaving the panicked noble sweating profusely, utterly unable to comprehend what Colin is actually planning. Panicking at his ruined bets, Slaith screams at his guards to send out every single gladiator, while Marquis Darius watches the unfolding chaos with a highly amused smirk on his face. Down in the dark holding cells, a small army of heavily armed warriors prepares to march, reminding Colin of the Marquis' old dream to create a world of equal magical education. But securing a spot in House Hall requires making an absolutely unforgettable first impression. Simply winning this rigged match won't be enough to catch the powerful lord's eye. So our hero boldly raises his blade and challenges the entire arena at once, sending the bloodthirsty crowd into a wild frenzy over his seemingly suicidal declaration. Instantly, a wave of seasoned killers rushes forward to tear the arrogant slave apart. Yet Colin remains completely unfazed as their massive steel weapons close in on him, dodging a devastating hammer strike that shatters the stone floor right where he stood. His opponents gasp in utter disbelief as they realize their target has vanished entirely, only to look up and see him soaring gracefully through the air above them, unleashing a blinding, acrobatic slash that effortlessly cuts through their ranks in seconds. Before the dust can even settle, two spear-wielding warriors charge him from both sides, effortlessly disarming another heavy attacker with a perfectly timed high-impact kick, spinning around to deliver a lethal counterslash that sends his attackers crashing down, leaving a trail of defeated gladiators in his wake as he dominates the battlefield. Suddenly, a massive armored brute sneaks up behind him to deliver a fatal blow. But Colin merely glances back with a cold, knowing look that spells immediate doom. Tightening his grip on the cheap hilt, Colin prepares to end this mockery of a fight, launching himself forward to shatter his opponent's defense with one final crushing blow, as his blade pierces straight through the armor, painting the arena dirt in deep crimson. Before anyone can process the kill, he hurls his blood-soaked sword straight toward the VIP balcony, narrowly missing Slaith's head as the heavy iron blade slices through the air, embedding itself deep into the stone wall behind the terrified noble with a deafening crash. Cold sweat pours down Slaith's face as he stares at the weapon vibrating inches from his ear. While down below, our protagonist looks up with a gaze that promises absolute ruin, making the humiliated Viscount silently vow to make this insolent slave pay in blood. Trying to save face, Slaith forces a laugh, but the surrounding elites are completely speechless, especially Marquis Darius, who openly mocks the Viscount for letting a mere pawn ruin his entire game. Furious nobles immediately turn on Darius, demanding the insolent gladiator be executed for threatening their status, but the powerful Marquis merely narrows his eyes, repeating their pathetic demands with cold disdain. He stands tall, questioning if looking down on others is truly what passes for noble common sense, instantly silencing the snobbish crowd as they shrink back under his overwhelming, suffocating presence, until Slaith slams his staff down, asking if Darius is still chasing his foolish egalitarian dreams. Gathering a swirl of green magical energy in his hand, the Viscount prepares to lecture his rival. Recalling the ancient myth of how gods bestowed magic to establish a permanent sacred hierarchy, insisting that nobles are divine agents meant to rule over the weak with absolute authority. With a smug grin, Slaith thrusts his staff forward, demanding to know if Darius dares defy God. Colin just smirks, completely unfazed by the Viscount's grand speech about divine right, having already bypassed the arena gates to sit casually right among the terrified nobles, sending the entire VIP balcony into a panicked frenzy over this unprecedented security breach, while our protagonist calmly points his cheap sword directly at the trembling Viscount's throat, boldly challenging the corrupt noble to back up his divine claims in a real fight. This suicidal challenge leaves the entire stadium whispering in absolute disbelief at his sheer audacity. Nearby aristocrats scoff at the slave's foolishness, fully expecting Slaith to vaporize him instantly, though Marquis Darius watches the unfolding drama with a much more calculated, intense focus, forcing Slaith to step down onto the dusty floor to defend his fragile noble pride, gathering a swirling vortex of green wind magic to obliterate the insolent gladiator once and for all. But as the Viscount unleashes his spell, a familiar magic circle glows beneath Colin's feet. Hearing the legendary Grimoire's voice in his mind, our hero's eye flashes with ancient power, displaying a holographic status window that reveals the noble's pathetic, beginner-level magical stats, while Slaith remains completely oblivious, continuing to channel his wind magic with arrogant fury, meeting Colin's cold, unimpressed gaze that has already seen the literal end of the world. This Viscount unleashes a massive gale, aiming to shred his opponent into microscopic pieces, which makes Marquis Darius instantly recognize the dangerous high-tier spell known as Wind Edge, prompting the cruel spectators to start placing bets on how many pieces the slave will become. As the violent green vortex completely swallows Colin in a blinding storm of razor-sharp wind, Slaith roars in triumph, utterly convinced he has just proven the absolute supremacy of noble blood. Colin stands inside the swirling vortex, calmly analyzing the wind blades designed to shred him to pieces. But a holographic status window pops up to reveal his newly acquired beginner-level magic resistance. Realizing that this simple defensive stat is more than enough to neutralize the Viscount's attack, our boy can't help but smirk at how incredibly useful his legendary Grimoire truly is. Standing completely unscathed amidst the raging gale, he prepares to show Slaith real power, effortlessly shattering the high-tier wind spell with a single casual wave of his hand. Slaith's jaw drops in absolute horror, his fragile noble ego completely shattered by the slave's survival. while the surrounding aristocrats watch in stunned silence, unable to comprehend this impossible feat, leaving Colin with the perfect opening to leap forward and end this pathetic display once and for all, forcing the panicked Viscount to draw his own weapon in a desperate bid for survival. This corrupt noble frantically pulls his blade, but his slow, clumsy movements are absolutely no match for a grandmaster, resulting in a swift, brutal clash that instantly disarms the noble and sends him crashing down, with the cold steel of Colin's sword pressing directly against his trembling throat, completely dominating the arena floor as Slaith whimpers beneath his blade in total defeat. Suddenly, a sharp warning from the Grimoire alerts Colin to a massive surge of magic nearby, just as a glowing purple magic circle erupts directly beneath his feet without warning. Dark skeletal hands of pure shadow magic burst from the ground, tightly gripping his leg, multiplying rapidly to drag him down and completely restrict his movements before he can react, binding our protagonist as the sinister dark magic wraps tightly around his neck and face, as a mysterious, heavily armored knight steps into the arena to announce their sudden arrival. This armored knight demands to know if Colin is the slave who dared to insult God, declaring that this insolent gladiator is now officially under arrest in the name of the heavens, revealing himself as a member of the legendary Divine Guard, the ultimate enforcers of holy law. This elite force serves the Magic Tower, an organization dedicated to preserving the absolute supremacy of noble bloodlines. Their ranks are filled with powerful aristocrats whose magical capabilities far surpass those of ordinary rulers. But Colin knows he could easily shatter these shadow restraints with a single burst of strength, yet doing so would immediately draw the unwanted attention of the powerful entities watching from above, forcing our protagonist to make a high-stakes gamble to secure his freedom right here and now. Taking a deep breath, he prepares to drop a massive bombshell that will change everything, boldly declaring himself to be Colin Hall, the long-lost son of Marcus Darius Hall himself, leaving the elite guards completely frozen as they process this shocking claim of noble lineage, while Slaith's face turns pale with absolute terror at the mere mention of the Marquise's name. Whispers immediately ripple through the crowded stands as the spectators try to make sense of this revelation, knowing that the Divine Guard is strictly forbidden from ever laying a hand on true nobility, which leaves our clever hero quietly waiting to see how his calculated gamble will play out. Refusing to believe the claim, Slaith draws his sword and accuses the slave of telling desperate lies, lunging forward with murderous intent to execute Colin before anyone can verify his true identity. But a booming voice suddenly echoes across the entire arena, commanding the frantic Viscount to stop. Marcus Darius steps forward in all his majestic glory, his overwhelming presence instantly silencing the entire stadium. As Slaith quickly tries to save face, claiming he was simply disposing of an insolent liar, Darius suddenly grabs Colin by the throat, roaring about dragging their family name through the mud, leaving the elite guards completely stunned as they try to process this sudden family reunion, while Slaith stands there utterly bewildered, his tiny brain struggling to comprehend the massive revelation. Tightening his grip, the Marquis scolds his son for failing to learn his lesson at the trading company, forcing Colin to play along with the act despite the suffocating pressure of his father's hand, as Darius loudly condemns the boy for having the nerve to attack a fellow noble. Behind his strained expression, our hero quietly celebrates knowing his high-stakes gamble has officially paid off, especially since the Marquis's subtle, knowing glance suggests the powerful lord is playing the exact same game. Turning his attention back to the crowd, Darius maintains his iron grip on the bound gladiator, offering a mock apology to the trembling Viscount for the immense trouble his foolish child caused. Colin immediately plays his part, shouting back that Slaith was the one who insulted their family first, which earns him a booming command to shut his mouth from his furious father. Stepping forward, the lead guard offers to take custody and personally discipline the insolent young noble, but Darius casually dismisses them all, declaring that he will handle his own family matters privately. Suddenly, a desperate voice echoes through the arena, refusing to let the prisoner walk away so easily. Slaith draws his sword, accusing the Marquis of staging a ridiculous performance to save a mere slave, though Colin merely watches the unraveling noble with a cold, calculating look of absolute satisfaction, realizing that the humiliated Viscount has completely lost his mind and is about to ruin himself. In a final act of desperation, Slaith lunges forward with his blade pointed directly at the Marquise. Down below, our protagonist can't help but let out a quiet smirk as the trap snaps shut. Colin smirks, reminding the Viscount that his open challenge applied to literally anyone in the arena, which obviously includes the powerful lord of the Rhine territory, standing right in front of him, along with the elite Divine Guard who arrived to make the arrest in God's name, leaving Colin to mockingly ask if Slaith is planning to rebel against all of them too. This sudden realization hits the corrupt noble like a truck, sending him into a cold sweat, with the terrified noble stumbling backward, dropping his sword and desperately trying to deny the treasonous accusation. Seeing the political disaster unfolding, the lead Divine Guard calmly snaps his armored fingers, instantly dissolving the shadow restraints around Colin while claiming the whole thing was a misunderstanding, bowing politely to apologize for their rash behavior before preparing to take their leave. But before they exit, the lead guard turns back to cast a freezing glare at Slaith, delivering a devastating blow by promising a full report of this incident to the Magic Tower. completely breaking the Viscount, sending him collapsing to the floor in absolute, ruinous despair. Down on the dirt, our protagonist lets out a quiet sigh of relief, his gamble paying off, while the departing guards march out of the arena, discussing the mysterious gladiator named Colin. One of the subordinates asks if he really is the legendary Marquis's long-lost son, wondering how such a powerful lord could keep a child hidden from the world for so long. But the lead guard narrows his eyes, completely convinced that the boy is an imposter. Still, the others note how incredibly calm Colin remained even while bound by high-tier restraint magic, prompting their leader to order a strict, constant surveillance on his every move from now on. This elite squad salutes in unison, ready to shadow our hero's every step. A luxurious carriage speeds down a quiet dirt road surrounded by dense forest, while a booming laugh echoes from inside the vehicle as it rattles along, with Marquis Darius absolutely losing his mind over the sheer audacity of Colin's performance. Though a heavy, tense silence quickly settles over the passengers sitting inside the cabin. Breaking the quiet, the powerful lord sincerely thanks our protagonist for playing along earlier, prompting Colin to realize his slave contract has already been bought out by the butler. But the Marquis suddenly asks if the boy has ever fought on a real battlefield, noting that his flawless movements resemble those of a highly trained Grandmaster swordsman. Thinking quickly, Colin spins a tragic backstory about being sold off to a slave trading company, claiming a mysterious noble eventually bought him and taught him the fundamentals of magic, adding that this savior was like a true father to him before passing away, leaving him with a grand ideal that he unfortunately failed to achieve in his past life, which is why he is determined to succeed this time around no matter what, swearing to fulfill those expectations even if it ultimately costs him his very life. This passionate speech deeply moves Darius, who assumes Colin's magic resistance comes from basic training, marveling at the young man's unyielding spirit despite surviving such incredibly harsh circumstances, believing this mysterious youth might actually be the key to making his own ideals a reality. Suddenly, the butler interrupts their deep conversation to alert the Marquis of their destination, as the carriage finally pulls up to the gates of a massive, breathtakingly luxurious estate, marking the beginning of Colin's new life as the supposed heir to the powerful Hall family. Marquis Darius steps out of the carriage first, gesturing for Colin to follow him. He casually announces that the boy is officially no longer a slave, but quickly warns him that freedom does not guarantee a peaceful life ahead. Survival of the fittest is the absolute law of this brutal world, and the powerful lord makes it clear his direct assistance ends right here. From this point on, overcoming the upcoming trials will depend entirely on Colin, who silently absorbs the warning while keeping his composure perfectly intact, prompting the Marquis to smirk, admitting he has incredibly high expectations for the boy. Standing before the massive estate, our protagonist realizes the first stage is officially cleared. Historically, high-ranking nobles only marry their equals to preserve their precious magical bloodlines, making the prestigious Hall family especially obsessed with maintaining their absolute supremacy. Yet Darius was a rare exception, born to a mere servant mother and heavily despised, though his sheer strength and relentless effort eventually forced him into the rank of Duke, ultimately securing his position as the legendary ruler of the entire Rhine territory. Back in the present, the powerful lord declares he cares nothing for Colin's background, leading the group inside the luxurious mansion while dismissing the boy's mysterious past. Because in this household, raw power is the only currency that actually matters. Wealth, status, and ultimate honor are all within reach for those strong enough to seize them. As Darius places his hand on the grand door, promising to grant any desire, provided Colin possesses the lethal skills required to survive and earn it. Darius stares intently at Colin, warning him to keep those words of survival in mind, but our protagonist merely smirks, asking if the powerful lord truly means he can have absolutely anything, narrowing his eyes as he prepares to make a demand that will shock everyone in the room, boldly asking if he can take the Marquess's very seat as the ruler of the territory. This Marquess pauses in surprise, slowly repeating the words as he processes the boy's sheer audacity, before suddenly bursting into a booming laugh that echoes through the grand hallways of the mansion, challenging Colin to try and take the title from him if he actually has the strength. Our hero quietly observes his new father, realizing the legendary lord is a true meritocrat at heart, a dangerous mindset that naturally makes him despised by the kingdom's corrupt, bloodline-obsessed nobility. Suddenly, a cold, elegant voice echoes from the shadows, welcoming the master back to his estate. This warm atmosphere instantly vanishes as Darius tenses up, his expression turning incredibly sharp, revealing the family's eldest son, Freed, standing alongside the Marquess's second wife, Katrina Williams, who claims they have been eagerly waiting for his return despite his highly secretive travel plans. Darius narrows his eyes, mockingly asking who exactly leaked the news of his arrival this time, while the elegant woman simply giggles, hiding her smug satisfaction behind a delicate hand. This powerful lord refuses to play her political games, staring her down with absolute disdain, bluntly accusing his wife of keeping constant tabs on him through her network of stealthy spies. Watching from the side, Colin glares at Katrina, recognizing her as the ruthless mastermind from his past, who used her massive inherited fortune to secure power while plotting to make Freed the sole successor. But our reborn hero takes a firm step forward, swearing he won't fall for her traps again. Colin looks them dead in the eye, introducing himself with absolute confidence to the hostile crowd. boldly claiming the name of Colin Hall while pledging his loyalty to his new family, which instantly sends Freed into a state of pure, unadulterated shock and disbelief. Stepping forward in a rage, the eldest son is quickly held back by his mother's hand. As Katrina sneers at the audacity of a mere slave using their prestigious noble name, she immediately calls out to the butler, her voice dripping with cold, menacing authority, demanding to know why he has been neglecting this insolent newcomer's proper education, leaving the loyal butler sweating under her intense pressure, unable to utter a single word. But Colin suddenly draws a training sword, declaring he received his name from the Marquis himself, pointing the blade directly at the corrupt nobles to challenge their right to object, before boldly promising that he will eventually rule this territory and make them all bow. This outrageous declaration leaves Katrina completely speechless, her face twisting with silent fury, while Freed glares back with murderous intent, his blood boiling at the kid's disrespect. Though Darius merely watches the chaotic scene unfold with a subtle, highly amused smirk. Behind them, the male servants whisper in utter disbelief at the boy's suicidal ambition, with the maids gossiping about how a mere slave could dare to speak so highly, until Katrina clears her throat, instantly commanding the entire room's attention with a single sound. This gossiping staff immediately freeze in terror, knowing better than to anger their ruthless mistress, while our hero maintains his smug composure, completely unfazed by the heavy tension in the air, prompting the furious matriarch to silently vow to put this arrogant slave in his place. Instantly, the hostile servants draw their weapons and charge forward to seize the arrogant newcomer. But a booming roar from the Marquis instantly freezes everyone dead in their tracks, with Darius boldly declaring that he is willing to hand Colin his entire noble title, leaving Freed completely stunned by his father's willingness to give away their family legacy. As the eldest son steps forward to demand an explanation for this absolute madness, this legendary lord merely glares back with a cold, unyielding gaze that brooks no argument, prompting Katrina to quickly mask her fury behind a sweet, deceptively polite smile, though her eyes narrow as she prepares to spring a clever political trap, pointing out that hundreds of loyal servants work tirelessly day and night for the family, yet only a select few are ever deemed worthy of receiving the prestigious hall name, which makes the sudden elevation of a nameless slave an insult to their entire household. She steps closer to her husband, questioning why a random nobody deserves such an honor, hoping to turn the entire estate against this insolent boy before he can settle in. So she smoothly proposes a special test to verify if Colin actually possesses real talent, demanding that he be permanently exiled from the territory if he fails to meet expectations. Our protagonist merely chuckles at her transparent scheme, instantly rejecting her rigged terms, which immediately triggers Freed into mockingly accusing the kid of getting cold feet. But Colin counters by suggesting they open the test to literally everyone in the manor, arguing that a capable outsider is far better than a useless failure born into privilege, leaving the arrogant heir grinding his teeth in absolute, red-faced humiliation at being thoroughly roasted. Freed grinds his teeth, absolutely horrified at the thought of competing with mere slaves for his inheritance. Suddenly, a delicate hand gently rests on his shoulder to halt his rising anger, with Katrina reminding her furious son that he needs to keep his composure, whispering that a true noble must remain graceful instead of raging over a mere monkey, especially since they still hold the ultimate advantage with their superior magical bloodline. Watching them scheme, Colin simply smirks, more than ready to put on a spectacular show, which successfully calms Freed down as he prepares to crush this arrogant newcomer. Ultimately, the Marquis accepts the proposal, scheduling the grand selection test for 1 month away, forcing our protagonist to work as a low-ranking servant in the mansion until then. This temporary demotion actually works in his favor, giving him ample time to study his magic. But the butler suddenly breaks the silence, noting how easily the boy manipulated the Marquis. He warns Colin that while Darius holds noble ideals, many enemies are watching his every move, before casually questioning the tragic backstory about the mysterious noble savior who raised him, pointing out that the slave traders claim they bought him directly from a remote village. This loyal butler slowly reaches for a concealed blade, his polite demeanor completely vanishing, catching our reborn hero slightly off guard as a sudden wave of murderous intent fills the air. Instantly, Cornell presses the sharp metal against Colin's throat, demanding to know his true motives. Yet the clever kid remains entirely unfazed, calmly acknowledging that the butler's suspicion is justified. He explains that those corrupt slave traders are ruthless criminals who constantly rig matches, reminding Cornell that they would never let an insubordinate slave walk away alive after ruining their scam. Cornell realizes the slave traders lied about Colin's skills being merely mid-level, since the Empire maintains incredibly strict ranking systems for both magic and swordsmanship, while most nobles only learn basic swordplay to focus entirely on mastering their magic, leaving high-level swordsmanship as a standard reserved strictly for elite royal guards. This realization makes the butler suspect the merchants fed him false information, plotting to get the boy killed before he could ever reach the estate. But Colin calmly points out that a real spy would never target the Lord's seat. Cornell narrows his eyes in confusion, demanding to know what the kid actually means, prompting our hero to explain that spies usually seek out hidden weaknesses from the shadows, meaning that if he truly wanted to secretly infiltrate this massive household, he would have targeted the butler's highly influential position instead of the throne, since gathering dirt on the family is far easier from behind the scenes. before boldly proposing a deal to sniff out other spies in exchange for Cornell's backing. This butler warns him that this dangerous game will make enemies of every noble family. Yet, Colin simply smirks, fully embracing the high-risk nature of his ultimate plan, leaving Cornell deeply impressed by the boy's sharp intellect and absolute lack of fear, though he secretly wonders if this incredibly favorable deal hides a much darker motive. Deciding to play along for now, the butler offers to guide him to his quarters, which our protagonist accepts with a knowing smile that hints at his future schemes. As the sun sets over the grand estate where his true trial is about to begin, Cornell leads Colin outside, telling him he can choose any place he likes to sleep, but explains that Katrina Williams has divided the estate's servants into 3 strict ranks, starting with the elite first-class servants who directly attend to the main family members, followed by the second-class workers who are permitted to live inside the main mansion, while the lowest third-class servants are banished to the annex, forbidden from even approaching the residence. These bottom-tier workers handle trash, firewood, and horses for a measly 3 copper coins a day, and Cornell warns our hero about the most critical rule regarding these senior workers, demanding absolute, unquestioning obedience to them no matter what kind of abuse they hand out, as he throws open the stable doors to reveal a group of rugged, hostile thugs who instantly glare at the young newcomer with predatory grins, clearly eager to break him. Walking away, Cornell coldly reminds Colin that these harsh rules were laid down by Katrina herself, wearing a subtle, wicked smirk as he leaves the boy to his grim fate. Our protagonist quietly processes the warning, realizing the butler is testing his resolve once again, before stepping forward to face the 3 massive, intimidating brutes waiting in the stables. Instantly, Colin masks his dark thoughts behind a bright, incredibly cheerful, and innocent smile, which only makes the seasoned thugs burst into loud, mocking laughter at his apparent weakness. They sneer at him, mockingly addressing him as the legendary future lord of the territory, pointing out that he had the sheer audacity to pick a fight with the matriarch, vowing to teach this arrogant little slave a very painful lesson in proper manners, as one of the thugs brutally smashes a glass bottle, preparing to paint the floor red. This thug demands Colin get on his knees and beg for forgiveness until they are satisfied, while his smug partner leans in close, mockingly asking if the kid understands his place. But as the arrogant brute grabs his shoulder to force him down to the floor, Colin moves like lightning, grabbing the man's arm and snapping it with brutal precision, leaving the other 2 thugs completely frozen in absolute shock at his sudden violence. Before they can even react, our hero unleashes a devastating kick that sends another thug flying, crashing him hard into the wooden crates where he instantly passes out cold on the floor. Colin merely smirks, raising his hand as he calmly announces he won't be holding back, before delivering a massive, bone-shattering slap that spins the first thug's head around, repeatedly striking him back and forth until the brute is desperately begging for mercy. This humiliating display completely enrages the remaining thugs, who scream in absolute red-faced fury, charging forward with a heavy wooden stool and a broken bottle to finish him. But our protagonist remains entirely calm, slowly drawing his training sword with a cold glare. He effortlessly parries the leader's desperate swing, completely throwing the man off balance, before delivering a brutal counterstrike that knocks out the thug's teeth in a spray of blood. Leaping high into the air, Colin easily dodges the red-haired brute's heavy stool smash, and counters with a devastating punch straight to the middle of the thug's face, sending the massive brute flying across the stable like a useless ragdoll. This bruised leader struggles to sit up, clutching his bleeding mouth in utter disbelief, only to find the cold tip of Colin's training sword pressed firmly against his throat. Colin stares down at the beaten thug, calmly asking if they are finally satisfied, and the terrified leader quickly screams in agreement, desperately trying to save his own skin. Satisfied with the response, our protagonist casually turns away and rests his sword on his shoulder. But the humiliated brute merely seethes with silent rage, refusing to accept this utter defeat. Sneakily grabbing a jagged shard of a broken glass bottle from the stable floor, this desperate thug lunges forward to strike our hero from behind with lethal intent, only for Colin to react with blinding speed, delivering a clean, merciless counterslash, sending the severed hand and the broken bottle flying through a sudden spray of blood. While the mutilated attacker screams in absolute agony, the young warrior calmly sheathes his weapon, silently hoping that this brutal lesson is finally enough to keep them in line. He knows he has secured Cornell's temporary trust, though the path ahead remains incredibly volatile, prompting him to immediately summon his mystical grimoire to begin his secret training, realizing that mastering advanced magic is his only hope of surviving the upcoming selection test. This political struggle dates back to when Katrina married the Marca and replaced the loyal staff, forcing Darius to appoint his trusted friend Cornell as butler to keep her ambition in check, since the butler held the ultimate authority to approve or reject any potential successor. Unfortunately, in Colin's past life, Cornell was mysteriously assassinated before he could stop her, allowing the ruthless countess to seize absolute control and force her useless son into power. Keeping the butler alive is crucial, but our hero first needs to upgrade his weak magic resistance, focusing his energy to manifest a powerful spell that perfectly blends absolute offense and defense. Activating his mystical grimoire, Colin touches the glowing page to absorb its ancient secrets, but the sheer volume of information immediately floods his brain with agonizing pressure. leaving his body completely paralyzed as a burning energy courses through his veins. Suddenly, a massive armored specter manifests within his mind, wielding a giant blade, its glowing blue eyes staring down at him with absolute cold hostility, demanding that the young intruder bow down and submit to its destructive power. Gritting his teeth, our hero struggles to maintain consciousness under this brutal mental assault, remembering how easily the pampered nobles claim magic flows for those with pure bloodlines, which only highlights the unfair advantage his enemies have enjoyed since birth. Yet, instead of despairing, Colin merely smirks as a wild, defiant fire ignites inside him, pressing his hand firmly against the page to force this rebellious energy to obey, determined to conquer this trial and claim the power he needs to survive, swearing to crush any obstacle standing in his way no matter the cost. A powerful shockwave erupts from the stable, echoing silently into the dark night sky. This next morning, a pair of trembling hands wrings out a wet cleaning cloth, revealing the bruised and heavily bandaged thugs diligently working on their morning chores, until a familiar foot suddenly echoes at the entrance of the stable. Colin strolls in while yawning, casually teasing his terrified seniors for waking up so early, mockingly noting that trying to assassinate him in his sleep would have ended horribly anyway. With his subordinates thoroughly tamed, he opens his status window to review his newly upgraded abilities. Colin smiles in relief, realizing his high-risk magical breakthrough was a complete success, though his exhausted body desperately craves a warm meal after a long night of training. But his peaceful morning is suddenly interrupted by loud shouting echoing through the courtyard. Lowly servants quickly bow their heads in fear as the estate's elite guards march past, led by a scarred, ruthless lieutenant who demands absolute submission from everyone in his path. Suddenly, a terrified young worker carrying a heavy wooden bucket of water loses his footing, freezing in sheer terror as he accidentally blocks the path of the oncoming soldiers. Without a second thought, a brutal guard kicks the poor boy straight to the ground, sending the spilled water splashing directly onto the lieutenant's highly polished leather boots. An angry soldier immediately steps forward to punish the boy for this unforgivable offense, prompting the trembling servant to bow flat on the stone floor and beg for mercy. Surprisingly, the scarred leader kneels down and offers a seemingly warm, forgiving smile to the boy, which instantly relieves the terrified worker, who profusely thanks the man for his kindness. However, the lieutenant's gentle expression quickly twists into a sickening, sadistic grin of pure malice, as he brutally grabs the helpless boy's face with a vice-like grip to teach him a lesson, mercilessly blinding the poor servant in a horrific, bloody display of absolute, unchecked cruelty. Watching from the sidelines, the other workers tremble in silent horror at the gruesome sight, until the aggressive guard barks a harsh warning, demanding they mind their own business. Everyone immediately drops to their knees in submission, desperate to avoid the same grim fate. Meanwhile, Colin merely watches the brutal scene with total indifference, still wondering what to eat. This bandaged thug screams for his boss, desperate to get revenge for his severed hand, pointing frantically at Colin and warning the scarred lieutenant that the kid is completely insane. Glaring with his single good eye, the ruthless leader barks a harsh command at our hero, who merely stretches his arms in total indifference while the other terrified servants cower on the floor. Colin casually looks back with a smug grin, asking if they want their hands chopped off next, which only makes the sadistic lieutenant laugh as he licks fresh blood off his own fingers, ordering his armed guards to draw their swords and force the arrogant brat to submit. Unfazed by the threat, our protagonist slowly reaches for the hilt of his training weapon, calmly asking the soldiers if they would prefer to lose their arms or their heads. Surprisingly, the scarred leader backs off with a smirk, claiming he has no interest in fighting directly, stepping aside to let a much more dangerous opponent handle the troublesome newcomer. Colin's eyes suddenly widen in absolute shock as he recognizes the formidable warrior stepping forward, revealing Daku, a legendary former slave arena champion who now serves as an intermediate guard. Memories instantly flood our hero's mind as he stares at his old brother-in-arms in disbelief, recalling the brutal battles they fought side by side and the strategic plans they drew up together, back when they were legendary comrades who conquered the deadliest beasts on the battlefield. Returning to the grim reality, Daku coldly notes that Colin was just causing trouble again, prompting our protagonist to ask if his old friend is truly willing to defend these tyrants. Daku slowly draws his blade, reminding him that the estate's hierarchy demands absolute obedience from juniors, leaving Colin to realize that even his closest ally has been reduced to a mindless tool. Colin merely smirks, completely unfazed by the legendary champion standing right in front of him, while Daku prepares to strike, confident that his superior arena training will easily end this dispute. But the onlookers can only watch in breathless anticipation as the tension reaches a boiling point, only for the scarred lieutenant to suddenly freeze as a cold blade presses against his throat. In a blinding flash of speed, our hero has completely bypassed the guards to hold their leader hostage, leaving the surrounding soldiers screaming in absolute disbelief at how fast the kid moved. Even the legendary arena champion is left utterly stunned by the sheer velocity of the attack, looking down at his empty hand and realizing his own weapon was stolen without him noticing. Sweating profusely, the terrified lieutenant desperately tries to hide his fear behind a barrage of empty threats, boasting that he was personally chosen by a powerful divine messenger who will ruthlessly crush any defiance, though the other guards and servants can only watch this tense standoff with bated breath, before Colin casually tosses the stolen weapon aside, showing he has absolutely no fear of their threats. Relieved but deeply humiliated, the scarred leader tries to salvage his pride by demanding some form of punishment, slyly glancing back at his subordinates to signal that it is time to change their target. This two ruthless guards grin with sadistic pleasure as they step forward with their weapons drawn, brutally striking the unarmed champion from behind and leaving him severely wounded in a sudden ambush, which instantly sparks a wave of genuine anger in Colin as he witnesses this sickening betrayal. While the cruel lieutenant merely laughs, declaring he will teach his disobedient subordinate a lesson first, as the defeated warrior collapses onto the cold stone floor while his tormentors stand over him triumphantly, until a final merciless blow is delivered to ensure the fallen champion never dares to defy them again. This sadistic lieutenant pins Daku to the ground, mocking him for throwing away his only chance, while delivering a chilling warning about what happens to those who fail to fall in line. Before the cruel leader can finish, Colin suddenly leaps into the fray with blinding speed, catching the battered arena champion completely off guard as he watches the kid intervene. Our hero unleashes a devastating, sweeping strike that instantly sends the surrounding guards flying backward. Seeing a momentary lapse in Colin's defense, the scarred lieutenant smiles with sinister delight, lunging forward to strike down the arrogant newcomer from behind with a lethal overhead swing. Yet Colin spins around effortlessly, blocking the heavy blow with a perfectly timed counter parry, unleashing a shockwave of force that leaves the corrupt commander staring in absolute disbelief, realizing his own steel blade has been completely shattered by the sheer impact. Pressing his advantage, the young warrior points his sword at the trembling tyrant's throat, but Daku suddenly leaps forward to block the lethal thrust with his own weapon, forcing the two former comrades into a tense, silent standoff as their eyes lock. Both fighters quickly spring backward to create distance, the heavy tension hanging in the air. Standing protectively in front of his abusive superior, Daku warns Colin not to make things worse, though his heavily bleeding hand reveals the immense physical toll of blocking that single strike. Colin glares coldly at the corrupt guards, agreeing to back down just this once, prompting the terrified lieutenant and his remaining men to immediately turn tail and run. Turning to his old friend, our protagonist asks why a legendary champion refuses to fight back, only for Daku to coldly walk away, muttering that defying their masters is a death sentence. Tossing his spare weapon aside, Daku decides to hand over a blade to his former comrade, warning Colin that keeping the cursed steel will only bring him terrible luck in the future. But our hero simply accepts the gift, standing tall as the cold wind sweeps through the courtyard. Meanwhile, the humiliated lieutenant takes out his boiling rage on a helpless, trembling servant nearby, brutally drowning the poor boy in a water barrel to salvage his own shattered pride. After dragging the gasping victim back up, the cruel leader demands a pathetic, choking apology, before violently kicking the bruised boy to the ground and ordering him to get lost. Watching the servant crawl away, a nearby guard asks if they are truly letting him off, prompting the sadistic lieutenant to grin, planning to frame the boy and isolate him completely, leaving the broken worker with no choice but to accept his miserable, unfair fate. Still, Colin cannot stop thinking about Daku, wondering why such a legendary warrior refuses to fight back. Elsewhere in the estate, a lavish feast is prepared for the high-ranking members of the household, who offer hypocritical prayers of devotion to their supreme god while stuffing their faces, while ambitious maids gossip about divine promotions, completely blind to the suffering around them. As they pray for eternal peace, the lower-class servants line up outside for their meager rations, receiving nothing but watery gruel and condescending lectures about being grateful for their suffering, which the starving workers quietly accept, desperate to survive another brutal day in this hierarchy. Suddenly, the servant at the front of the line freezes in utter shock, noticing Colin casually strolling up to the food stall while muttering about his empty stomach, leaving our oblivious protagonist completely confused as to why everyone is suddenly staring at him in terror. Just as Colin reaches for a bowl of warm soup, a hand suddenly snatches it away, with the bitter server shouting that those who do not work do not get to eat, leaving the surrounding workers to glare at our hero with pure hostility and resentment, though Colin merely sighs in annoyance while the petty crowd mocks his apparent misfortune. Their smug satisfaction quickly turns to utter confusion as they watch where he goes next. Realizing the crazy kid is casually strolling straight toward the senior servant's private dining area, Colin pushes right past the elite staff, completely ignoring their shocked and offended expressions, prompting the outraged high-class maids and butlers to scream for immediate disciplinary action. Unbothered by the chaos, our protagonist stands directly in front of their lavish buffet table, before stuffing a freshly baked golden croissant straight into his mouth without a care, which is exactly when the head butler, Cornell, steps forward to confront the hungry intruder. An angry subordinate immediately demands that Cornell brutally punish the insolent newcomer on the spot, but the stern leader simply stares at Colin, silently calculating his next move. Surprisingly, Cornell lets it slide, calmly telling Colin to follow him since mistakes are expected. This onlookers can only watch in absolute disbelief as the two walk away together, heading toward the grand balcony where Cornell brings up the rule of absolute obedience, while Colin casually laughs it off, claiming he is just looking for a fair deal, confidently explaining that his superior combat skills easily earn him the right to eat well, leading Cornell to offer to personally cover his living expenses to keep him fed, only for the butler's gaze to turn incredibly dark as he demands a heavy price in return. Cornell demands that our hero hunt down a dangerous spy hiding within the estate, but Colin's attention shifts as a loud horn signals the Lord's early departure to the hunting grounds, where some mysterious disturbance has apparently been reported deep within the dark forest. Casually finishing his stolen breakfast, the kid decides this is the perfect chance to investigate. wearing a smug grin as he plans his next move in the Forbidden Woods. Deep in the thicket, a majestic creature with glowing red eyes suddenly senses danger, revealing a rare red-eyed black deer that has wandered far from its usual territory, only for a volley of sharp arrows to instantly pierce its side and bring it down, while our protagonist lowers his bow with a highly satisfied smirk on his face. Walking up to his fresh prize, Colin draws his blade to claim his reward, plunging the steel deep into the beast to harvest its most valuable asset. Suddenly, his eyes glow with mystical light as he senses a powerful energy source, pulling out a glowing purple monster core that can be used to brew potent potions. Though he quickly realizes this particular stone is just a low-grade common rank, which is still more than enough to craft some useful mana recovery items. Turns out, Cornell had previously warned him that the hunting grounds were strictly off-limits, prompting Colin to slyly ask if joining the guard squad would bypass those annoying rules. Back in the present, a loud shout suddenly interrupts his peaceful harvesting session, as an angry panting guard catches up to scold him for wandering off alone, leaving our unbothered hero to casually look back and wonder what all the fuss is about. Colin casually swipes the guard's sword, claiming he just needs to borrow it for a moment, leaving the young soldier completely baffled as our hero unsheathes the blade with practiced ease, before plunging the steel deep into the carcass of the rare red-eyed black deer. With a smug grin, Colin declares that the kill now officially belongs to the guard, though the furious soldier immediately calls out this incredibly twisted and ridiculous logic. Grumbling under his breath, the guard laments being paired up with such an insolent servant, before stabbing the beast himself while questioning what Cornell was actually thinking. He pulls out a special dagger, presenting it as proof of his official mission, prompting Colin to explain they are supposed to assist the Lord and gather some food. While the guard continues to complain, our hero quietly secures the valuable monster core, forcing the young soldier to swallow his pride and focus on the task at hand. After carving up the beast, a massive pile of fresh, high-quality meat is prepared, which the ambitious guard hopes will finally earn him a promotion to the elite ranks, only for his eyes to widen in absolute horror at what he sees next. Sitting comfortably by a roaring campfire, Colin is already busy grilling their fresh prize, leaving the panicked guard to scream in disbelief at our hero's absolute lack of respect, frantically pointing out that this meat is strictly reserved for the estate's High Lord. Unbothered, Colin takes a massive bite, casually claiming that a little taste test won't hurt, before offering a juicy roasted piece straight to the trembling young soldier, who dramatically refuses the temptation, swearing he would never betray his superiors for a snack. Colin casually points out that the young soldier only gets to eat once every 3 days, shoving the juicy meat directly into his mouth while reminding him of his impending punishment back home, since protecting the High Lord is practically impossible to pull off on an empty stomach. Our hero flashes a reassuring grin, promising to keep this little feast a total secret, prompting the weeping soldier to finally give in and aggressively devour the roasted meat. Watching him eat, Colin asks why such a capable fighter lets the vice captain walk all over him. But the young guard merely sighs, questioning what real value strength even holds in this world. He explains that the ruling nobles were chosen by God and granted absolute divine power, believing that working himself to the bone is the only way to protect his sister back home, angrily shouting at Colin for suggesting he throw away his hard-earned position as a servant. To him, survival means keeping his head down and blindly obeying their cruel masters, leaving our protagonist to quietly ponder the true nature of this so-called divine power. Colin scoffs with a knowing smirk, pointing out that it is really just basic magic. This bold claim immediately irritates the guard, who dares him to learn a single spell himself, only for Colin to lock eyes with him and offer to teach him magic right then and there, sending the young soldier into a state of absolute shock and disbelief. This stunned guard hesitantly asks if his companion can truly wield such power, struggling to process the reality of a mere servant possessing the secrets of the elite. Suddenly, a terrifying screech echoes through the trees, sending a flock of birds scattering in panic. Both men instantly freeze, their blood running cold as they realize something monstrous is heading their way. A terrifying azure flame wolf brutally bites down on a screaming guard, tearing through his armor. This veteran commander, Glenn, desperately orders his men to hold their formation against the pack, but the sheer speed of these mystical beasts quickly turns his confidence into pure dread. Screams echo through the forest as the glowing wolves easily bypass their defenses, shredding the front line, leaving Glenn to barely block a lethal bite with his shield while cursing his own weakness, before he manages to slash one of the beasts down with a desperate, heavy swing. Just as he recovers his footing, a panicked shout from a comrade shatters his focus, warning him that 3 more flame-shrouded monsters are already leaping at his blind spot. Glenn freezes in sheer terror, realizing he has absolutely no time left to dodge the ambush, only for a sudden volley of sharp arrows to pierce the wolves midair with lethal precision. As the beasts crash to the dirt, a heavy boot lands firmly on the forest floor, revealing Colin and his young companion arriving just in the nick of time to help, though our greedy hero is mostly just calculating how much cash these rare pelts will fetch. Locking his eyes on the remaining pack, Colin draws 3 arrows back with effortless grace, before leaping straight off a high ledge to close the distance in a single bound, diving headfirst into the center of the deadly pack without showing a hint of fear. Glenn can only watch in absolute disbelief as the crazy kid charges straight into danger, while Colin merely smirks, mocking the beasts for relying on numbers to hunt their prey, releasing his arrows mid-air to pin the monsters to the ground in a bloody display before landing gracefully on his feet as the remaining wolves scatter in absolute terror. Colin locks his glowing blue eyes onto the next target, completely unfazed by the chaos, as a massive azure flame wolf lunges straight at him, completely ignoring the corpses of its pack. Our hero quietly mocks their sheer stupidity, wondering why these beasts can't sense the massive gap in power, before delivering a brutal kick that sends the heavy monster flying backward with bone-shattering force. This stunned guards can only watch in awe as the beast crashes violently against the stone wall, while another precise arrow pierces through a second wolf, painting the forest floor in deep crimson. Standing tall with his bow drawn, Colin casually notes that these legendary monsters are just dumb animals, prompting 3 more flame-shrouded wolves to aggressively charge him from the thick brush, only for his rapid-fire arrows to instantly pin them to the dirt in a bloody display. Glenn stares in absolute disbelief, sweating as he realizes a mere servant handled a threat they couldn't touch. Sensing a sudden shift in the air, Colin's sharp gaze darts toward a new threat, barely dodging a massive pillar of blue fire that erupts right where he was standing, revealing a particularly vicious wolf that is clearly not happy about its pack being slaughtered. This beast lets out a deafening howl, its azure flames flaring up with pure rage, forcing our agile protagonist to leap backward as a barrage of fireballs tears through the clearing. Mid-air, Colin effortlessly draws his bow and unleashes 3 heavy arrows straight into the monster's back, descending with absolute precision to deliver a final blow as he closes the distance, slamming his boot directly into the wolf's skull with enough momentum to crack the earth. As the dust settles around the defeated beast, Colin lands gracefully, completely unharmed by the intense skirmish. But a cold, sharp blade suddenly flashes right in front of his face, stopping him dead in his tracks. Colin looks down as a sudden arrow pierces the skull of the wolf he just kicked, revealing Daku standing with his bow drawn, warning our hero not to let his guard down, which earns him a cheerful thumbs up and a wink from an incredibly amused Colin. This young guard can only sigh in exhaustion, completely done with his companion's reckless antics, while Commander Glenn approaches them, demanding to know who these highly skilled fighters actually serve. Daku quickly explains they are just a reserve guard and a low-level servant sent by Cornell, leaving the veteran commander completely stunned by the sheer absurdity of their low ranks, struggling to process how a mere servant and a rookie could easily outshine his elite squad. Behind him, the wounded elite guards grumble in disgust, feeling utterly disgraced by their saviors, prompting Daku to tilt his head in confusion at their mention of an old hag. Meanwhile, Colin quietly extracts a glowing purple mid-rank core from the dead beast's chest, planning to use it for a high-grade potion straight out of his secret magic book. Suddenly, a harsh voice barks out a rude insult, instantly catching our hero's attention, as an arrogant elite guard stands over him, demanding he step away from the carcass. Glenn tries to defuse the tension, telling his subordinate to prioritize their mission for the Marcus, but Colin merely looks up with a cold glare, questioning the guard's lack of respect. This calm defiance immediately strikes a nerve, causing the angry soldier's face to twitch with rage. He has to be physically held back by his comrades as he aggressively screams threats at Colin, who simply memorizes the man's name, Marvin, with a chillingly calm and dangerous look. Before the scene shifts to the Grand Estate, where the High Lord silently contemplates his next move, Colin stares at a portrait of the Marcus top guards, recognizing Glenn, Marvin, Sarah, and Cornell, remembering that in his past life, these 3 were Darius's most trusted elite protectors, whose tragic deaths in the Gloomwood Forest ultimately stripped the Marquis of his political power. Back in reality, Daku frantically apologizes to the elites, claiming Colin is just a clueless rookie. But the purple-haired guard, Sarah, snaps back, telling the old hag's dog to shut up, leaving a completely bewildered Daku to wonder who exactly she is calling a dog. Commander Glenn steps forward, asking Colin if he really told the madam he would become Lord, openly admitting that while the kid is undeniably strong, ambition has its limits, warning Colin that keeping such dangerous, high-reaching ideas will only lead to a painful regret. Our protagonist merely stares back with a cold, silent gaze, completely ignoring the veteran's warning. Glenn thanks them for the timely rescue before turning his squad back toward their main mission, only for a sudden violent tremor to shake the ground and freeze everyone in their tracks, as a flock of panicked birds scatters from the canopy amid a deafening, thunderous roar, revealing a massive pack of azure flame wolves charging straight toward their position with lethal intent. This elite guards turn around in absolute horror, realizing they are completely outmatched and surrounded, while Sarah screams in pure terror as she recognizes the monstrous leader of the pack. This legendary Azure King, a colossal beast radiating intense glowing blue flames from its body. This terrifying alpha locks its glowing red eyes onto the intruders, baring its razor-sharp fangs, as the rest of the pack closes in, trapping the exhausted soldiers in a deadly circle, leaving Glenn and his squad to grit their teeth in sheer desperation as death looms close. This colossal Azure King lunges forward with a deafening roar, its blue flames burning with pure hatred, while Colin braces himself for the impact, gritting his teeth as the beast closes the distance, leaving Glenn to watch in absolute shock as the mysterious kid prepares to face the monster alone. Suddenly, Colin intercepts the lethal strike with his blades, casually apologizing for his slightly late arrival, flashing a confident smirk as he reminds the elite squad that he just saved their lives again. This arrogant display only infuriates the giant alpha, which unleashes a deafening howl of pure rage, prompting our protagonist to immediately shift into a stance and initiate his secret sword art. unleashing a devastating mountain crusher slash that collides directly with the beast's massive, flame-shrouded head. Yet the legendary monster barely flinches, its thick hide absorbing the impact with terrifying ease, forcing Colin to quickly backpedal while silently noting just how incredibly sturdy his opponent really is. Before he can even recover his footing, a massive torrent of azure fire erupts from the beast's maw, requiring him to cross his dual swords to block the searing heat of the magical blast, which violently blows him backward across the clearing as the sheer force of the explosion ripples out. Landing on his feet, Colin grimaces as he realizes his current physical vessel has its limits. As he looks down at his cracked, chipped blade and concludes that pure swordsmanship won't cut it here, Glenn and his elite guards quickly rally behind him, warning the kid that this monster is a renowned killer. While the Azure King stands tall, its glowing red eyes locking onto its prey with cold malice, with the rest of the ferocious pack closing the circle, completely trapping the exhausted soldiers. Marvin panics instantly, sweating bullets as he wonders how they can possibly survive being so heavily outnumbered. But Colin merely looks back with a calm gaze, telling them the underlings are just the king's puppets. Colin explains that these lesser beasts have no free will and only follow their leader's commands, leaving Glenn to sweat in sheer disbelief at the insane suggestion of targeting the Alpha directly, while Daku frantically points out that Colin's sword is already chipped and completely ruined. Our smug protagonist merely smirks back, claiming they will never know unless they actually try. This reckless confidence convinces the young rookie that his companion has officially lost his mind, though Glenn begrudgingly agrees that fighting is their only remaining option to survive this nightmare. But Colin quickly interrupts the veteran, telling the squad there is no need to charge blindly, promising them that a perfect opening to strike will present itself very soon. Right on cue, the colossal Azure King throws its head back with a deafening howl, commanding its massive pack of flame-shrouded wolves to charge forward and slaughter the intruders, forcing the terrified elite guards to raise their weapons as the swarm closes the distance. Suddenly, Colin's authoritative voice rings out across the clearing, ordering everyone to stay calm. Locking his glowing blue eyes onto the incoming horde, he instructs them to draw the beasts closer, which immediately infuriates Marvin, who hates being ordered around by a mere low-level servant, as Glenn quickly shuts down the internal squabble, forcing the angry guard to hold his tongue. Turning his attention away from the elites, Colin casually commands Daku to follow him. He challenges the rookie's resolve, asking if he wants to make his little sister proud, instantly sparking a fire in Daku's eyes as he remembers his beloved Erika, just as the ferocious pack crashes into the front line, forcing Glenn to brace his shield. But Colin barks out a final warning, telling the desperate soldiers to hold their ground. Colin commands the squad to draw the ferocious beasts in even closer, waiting patiently as the snarling pack lunges directly into their defensive line, before suddenly shouting for the elites to initiate their counterattack right now. Locking his glowing gaze, he orders Glenn to blind the beasts with his shield art, prompting the veteran commander to unleash a blinding flash of holy protection. Immediately after, Colin barks out another order for Marvin to strike next, who leaps high into the air to execute his devastating Heaven Shaker technique, slamming his massive greatsword down to scatter the disoriented pack in all directions. Our protagonist then commands Sarah to open a path using her phantom blade, sending a flurry of lethal rapier thrusts that tears through the remaining beasts. Glenn watches in absolute shock, realizing this mere servant knows their elite techniques perfectly. With the path finally cleared, Colin calls out to Daku to move out, while Sarah mocks the rookie, warning him not to slow them down. Daku can only sweat in confusion, struggling to understand his companion's bizarre strategy. This duo sprints directly past the chaotic skirmish, heading straight for the massive Alpha, prompting Daku to frantically ask what on earth Colin is actually planning here. He calmly explains that charging without fear will easily shake the giant beast's confidence, leaving the young rookie even more bewildered by the insane psychological tactic. This rookie points out that Colin cannot possibly attack the Alpha without a proper sword, only to realize in sheer disbelief that his partner is planning to use magic. Colin focuses his mana, a brilliant blue light erupting from his fingertips as he prepares his spell, summoning his secret magic book to unleash a high-tier spell known as the Ice Lotus, casting a massive glowing magic circle directly in front of the charging Azure King's face, sending a torrential rain of razor-sharp ice shards tearing through the giant beast's thick hide, leaving Daku completely frozen in shock as he realizes his companion is actually a capable mage. Despite the devastating magical barrage, the colossal Alpha stands its ground, howling in absolute fury, prompting Colin to flash a cold, mocking smirk as he asks if it still wants more, which only drives the legendary beast into a blind, flame-shrouded rage as its red eyes glow. Seizing the moment, the two partners sprint forward together to execute their final coordinated strike, with Daku leaping high into the air to draw the monster's attention away from Colin, plunging his sword deep into the beast's head to create the perfect opening for his partner. Colin steps up with a cold glare, telling the giant mutt its run is officially over, as he channels his remaining mana to summon a colossal glowing blue knight of pure energy, which looms over the terrified Alpha with a massive glowing greatsword raised high in the air, locking its gaze onto the monster's wide, panic-stricken eye just before delivering the final blow. This summoned knight drives its massive blade straight down through the beast's open maw, unleashing a devastating pillar of energy that completely tears the legendary Alpha apart, sending shockwaves through the clearing that instantly break the mind control over the remaining pack. As the colossal Azure King collapses into a frozen, shattered heap of ice and blue fire, Daku can only stare at the absolute devastation in sheer disbelief, completely speechless at Colin's power. Colin casually holds a glowing blue ice crystal, leaving Daku completely stunned by his magical abilities. Glenn and his elite squad quickly approach the two rookies to check if they survived the battle. This veteran commander expresses his gratitude, admitting they would have been completely doomed without Colin's intervention. Meanwhile, a heavy boot steps onto the shattered remnants of the magical ice scattered across the ground. Sarah kneels down to inspect a frozen shard, starting to suspect there is much more to this kid. Marvin bursts into laughter, claiming Colin's reckless combat style reminds him of their former leader in his youth. When Daku asks who he means, the veteran guard proudly reveals he is talking about Lord Darius. He explains their history as elite royal knights while mocking the rookie for being completely clueless about it. This constant belittling finally pushes the young servant over the edge as his anger reaches a boiling point. Daku snaps and points an angry finger, demanding to know why they keep calling him a lapdog. He proudly shouts his own name before boldly calling the purple-haired elite an old lady to her face. This insult instantly freezes the clearing, sending a wave of pure murderous rage through the female knight. Marvin quickly leans over to whisper that Sarah actually calls the lady of the house an old hag. Realizing his massive mistake, the young rookie turns pale as absolute terror washes over his face. Sarah looms over him with a terrifying glare, demanding to know how she could possibly be considered old. She aggressively pokes his armor while insisting she is still a young girl in her absolute prime. Before Daku can even apologize, she locks him in a brutal headlock to teach him a lesson. Watching the chaotic bickering, Colin merely stares in silence as a sudden wave of nostalgia hits him. He fondly remembers his past life when his own comrades used to fool around in the exact same way. But their lighthearted moment is instantly shattered when a massive monstrous hoof violently stomps down right before them. Fried rides into the clearing on horseback, demanding to know what all the noise is about. Glenn and his elite squad immediately recognize the newcomer, while Colin silently registers the young master's arrival. But Daku instantly tenses up, casting a highly anxious glance toward his dark-haired companion. Cold sweat pours down the young rookie's face as a heavy, suffocating dread washes over him, prompting Glenn and his guards to drop to one knee and apologize for the sudden commotion. Narrowing his eyes in deep suspicion, the arrogant noble looks around the blood-soaked battlefield, demanding to know how a mere scouting mission ended with a pile of dead magical beasts, which leads Glenn to explain that they would have been slaughtered without the rookie's help. Freed's gaze suddenly shifts toward the tree line, spotting Colin kneeling over one of the carcasses. Our protagonist casually drives his dagger into the beast's skull, completely ignoring the noble's arrival. When Glenn suggests reporting these massive achievements to the Lord, Freed's expression instantly sours, realizing that this low-born servant is actively threatening his own claim to the family throne. Fearing it would completely ruin his standing as the favored successor if his father ever found out. Gritting his teeth in sheer frustration, the young master struggles to maintain his composure, while Daku braces himself for the inevitable verbal abuse he knows is coming next. This young master sneers down at the rookie, mocking him for associating with such low-class trash, reminding him that entering these sacred hunting grounds is a severe violation of their rules. These harsh insults hit deep, leaving the young servant to stare at the ground in silence. But the noble pushes too far, bringing up Daku's little sister to threaten him once again. Daku suddenly smirks, boldly firing back that he still performs better than a pathetic mama's boy. Colin smirks right at the arrogant noble, casually calling him a reject to his face, which immediately sends Sarah into a fit of giggles while Glenn frantically tries to quiet her down, driving the spoiled young master into an absolute vein-popping rage over the blatant disrespect. Colin calmly points out that the only reason anyone ever kneels to Fried is his family name, leaving the surrounding soldiers and servants completely paralyzed by the rookie's suicidal level of audacity. Our smug protagonist keeps pushing, mocking the noble for strutting around on his parents' accomplishments. Fried coldly threatens to have him executed on the spot, but Colin just cheerfully agrees, before winking and suggesting that Fried would still need to run home to his mother first. Mimicking a whiny child begging mommy for permission to finally get rid of a pesky slave. This final insult completely breaks the noble's composure, prompting him to scream for Colin's immediate arrest, as heavy iron chains suddenly burst from the dirt, wrapping tightly around the rookie's legs. Colin narrows his eyes, calmly watching the metal links bind his arms without showing any fear, while several hooded assassins materialize from the shadows to secure their target with absolute precision. One of the masked captors presses a cold blade directly against our protagonist's throat, forcing Glenn and his elite squad to recognize these terrifying killers as the legendary Blades of the Empire, a brutal group of assassins so overwhelmingly skilled that even high-ranking nobles tremble at their name. It turns out these lethal killers were personally dispatched by the Countess to protect her precious son. Though one of the assassins quickly warns the young master against making a reckless move, Glenn drops to one knee, explaining that these elites are only here to assist with the investigation, prompting Fried to glare down at the veteran commander, demanding to know if he is defying him too. Glenn stammers in fear, completely intimidated by the presence of the Countess's elite assassins. Colin remains completely unfazed by his chains, locking his calm gaze onto the sweating captain. He quietly tells Glenn to ignore him and just report the investigation to the Lord. Realizing the kid is giving them an escape route, the veteran commander hesitates in silence, Sarah whispers that they cannot afford to take sides and must withdraw from this mess immediately. Gritting his teeth in frustration, Glenn hates leaving the brave rookie behind but has no choice. This two elite knights bow out and leave the clearing, much to Fried's smug satisfaction. This arrogant noble sneers at Colin, mocking his absolute powerlessness now that his life is forfeit. Our protagonist simply grins back, daring the spoiled young master to just get it over with. Fried chuckles darkly, a twisted and malicious plan suddenly forming in his mind. Drawing his sword with a dramatic flourish, he proudly announces his brilliant new idea. He suddenly barks out Daku's name, causing the terrified young servant to flinch in panic. This sadistic noble reminds him that actions always have consequences in this cruel world, throwing a heavy steel sword directly into the dirt right in front of the rookie. Fried coldly commands the trembling servant to pick up the blade and execute his partner, leaving Daku completely frozen in absolute horror as the weight of the order sinks in. While the noble promises to overlook all of today's insubordination if he obeys the command, this twisted ultimatum triggers a sudden flashback to Colin's past life during the demon invasion, where he was brutally beaten and thrown to the ground by monstrous demon soldiers, staring up in defiance as a massive blade was driven directly into the dirt before him. This massive demon boss sits on his throne, mocking the kneeling soldiers' pathetic knightly vows. He offers a twisted deal to release the terrified human captives huddled in the background, pointing toward Dak's silver-haired comrade who is being held hostage by a hulking monster. This brutal demon demands that Dak execute his own brother-in-arms to save the others, wearing a sadistic grin as he waits to see how the broken knight will choose. Gripping the hilt of the sword, Dak trembles violently as the cruel reality sinks in, slowly standing up to face his bound companion with a heavy, agonizing heart. His silver-haired comrade looks back with a tragic smile, remembering his little sister Erica, recalling the warm embrace of the young girl who lost everything alongside them, after their mother fell ill and left them to survive as helpless slaves. Revealing his final secrets, he explains that Erica was sent away to safety before the demon invasion reached them, shedding a final tear as he begs Dak to look after her in his absence. Listening to his friend's final wishes, Dak can only stare down in silent, suffocating grief, as the dying knight asks to be remembered as a true hero for his sister, offering a heartbreaking apology right before the tragic flashback finally fades away. Back in the present, Daku stands in the exact same position facing his chained partner, while Colin remains completely calm and unbound by fear despite the heavy iron chains, leaving the young rookie to shake uncontrollably as history threatens to repeat itself. Fried suddenly snaps him out of his trance, shouting his name with absolute impatience, demanding to know why he is hesitating to execute the helpless slave right now. Daku firmly refuses to raise his blade, declaring he cannot execute the man who saved their lives. Fried merely smirks at this sudden display of backbone, completely unfazed by the rookie's defiance. He casually brings up Daku's sister Erica, asking how she would feel about being abandoned like this. This young rookie gasps in horror, his resolve instantly crumbling at the mention of his beloved sibling. Fried continues his psychological torture, recounting a story he heard from the family butler about the girl. He reveals that Erica starved herself to buy Daku a sword, collapsing from sheer exhaustion last week. This devastating news leaves the young servant completely paralyzed, his eyes wide with absolute dread and guilt. This cruel noble threatens to stop her medical care entirely if Daku chooses to disobey his orders. Terrified of losing his only family, the young rookie instantly drops his weapon and falls to his knees. Desperately begging the young master, he pleads for mercy to save his sister from a tragic fate. Fried looks down at the pathetic display, realizing he has successfully broken the servant's spirit once again. This cruel master delivers his final command, ordering Daku to execute his chained partner without any further delay. Suddenly, Colin breaks the heavy silence by letting out a low, mocking chuckle at the absurd situation. He bursts into loud laughter despite being tightly bound in heavy iron chains by the Imperial assassins. This unexpected reaction completely baffles the arrogant noble, who demands to know what could possibly be so funny. Colin sneers back, boldly claiming that a pathetic coward like Daku could never hope to kill him anyway. He proposes a fight to the death instead, mocking the rookie's sniveling and whining to provoke the noble. Fried hesitates in deep confusion, sweating as he tries to understand what the crazy kid is planning. This elite assassins keep their blades pressed close, ready to strike the moment their target makes a move. But the arrogant noble quickly smiles, assuming Colin is just putting on a brave face to hide his terror. Fried eagerly accepts the proposal, waving his hand to order the immediate start of the duel. This assassins release Colin from his chains, leaving the two rookies standing face to face with drawn swords. Daku freezes in shock as his partner immediately points a cold blade directly at his forehead, sweating profusely as he realizes the crazy kid might actually be serious about this fight. Meanwhile, Fried watches from his horse, silently reminding the servant of his sister's fragile life. Colin suddenly lunges forward, mockingly telling Daku not to make his precious little sister cry, launching a brutal high kick that forces the hesitant rookie to block in pure desperation, pushing Daku backward as the sheer force of the impact reverberates through his entire body. Our protagonist spins through the air, unleashing a relentless flurry of strikes with terrifying speed, leaving Daku completely overwhelmed as he struggles to keep up with the blinding movements. Jumping high once more, the young swordsman brings his blade down in a heavy overhead slash, which Daku barely manages to parry, their steel weapons clashing with a deafening screech. prompting the desperate servant to demand why his friend is suddenly trying to kill him. Leaning in close, Colin whispers a fake apology, claiming he simply wants to survive too. This sudden betrayal sparks a wave of pure fury in the young rookie's eyes, driving him to scream in rage as he violently repels Colin's blade with all his might, sending our protagonist sliding back across the dirt, though he lands perfectly on his feet. Raising his hand, Colin calmly signals to the crowd and announces a bold new condition, confidently declaring that he will end this entire pathetic duel in exactly 3 strikes. While Daku stares back in tense silence, trying to decipher his partner's true intentions, Daku snaps, shouting that he doesn't even need 3 strikes to end this farce, locking his glare onto his partner with a sudden, desperate surge of adrenaline. While Colin merely smirks back, completely satisfied that his provocation worked perfectly, leaving the arrogant noble to watch from his horse, expecting a swift and bloody execution. This young rookie lunges forward with everything he has, their swords clashing in a shower of sparks. But as their blades lock, Colin quietly whispers that he never abandons his comrades, sending a shockwave of pure realization through the young rookie's mind as they struggle, reminding him of the tragic hero from his past who stood tall against the darkness. Tears well up in Daku's eyes as the heavy burden of guilt finally lifts, which immediately alerts the masked assassins that something is seriously wrong with this duel. Before the 2 rookies suddenly spin around, standing back to back in a perfect combat stance, unleashing a massive vortex of wind and dust that tears through the entire clearing. This surrounding soldiers scream in terror as the violent shockwave knocks them off balance, while Fried's horse rears back in sheer panic from the sudden explosion of power, forcing the spoiled noble to realize he has been completely played by these rookies. Suddenly, Colin launches himself high into the air, aiming a lethal strike directly at Fried, screaming with absolute fury as he brings his heavy blade down on the noble. But the young master's eyes narrow as a surge of purple magical energy erupts, catching the incoming sword barehanded with a crackling shield of dark, defensive magic. Colin just grins at the display, mockingly noting that the coward actually knows how to fight. Colin mocks the arrogant noble, warning him not to underestimate what he can actually do. This spoiled young master retaliates by unleashing a violent surge of purple lightning directly at him, sliding back across the dirt as the elite assassins quickly surround him from all sides. But Colin notices a sudden shift in the battlefield that catches him completely off guard. Suddenly, the furious noble screams at his own men to stay back and stay out of it, forcing the masked killers to freeze in their tracks with their weapons still drawn. He loudly declares that he will be the one to personally end the rookie's life, prompting Colin to lock his gaze onto the spoiled master with absolute focus. Screaming in pure rage, the noble channels a massive amount of destructive magical energy, which manifests as a giant glowing blue spell circle directly above the clearing. Daku gasps in horror, instantly recognizing the terrifying level of magic being cast, while Colin stands right beneath the swirling vortex of crackling purple lightning. Our protagonist simply smirks, silently acknowledging that things are about to get incredibly sussy. As a system screen reveals, Fried possesses intermediate lightning magic that could kill him. Knowing he cannot easily withstand a direct hit, Colin's survival instincts kick in, yet he decides to test his limits anyway, summoning sharp blue ice shards around his hand. Fried points forward, roaring that he will teach the slave their power difference, before a devastating bolt of lightning rains down from the sky to obliterate him. But Colin's ice magic erupts just in time, clashing violently against the electrical storm, leaving him staring coldly through the shattering crystals, completely ready for the next move. A massive explosion of ice and lightning erupts, tearing through the entire clearing. Fried shields his face in sheer disbelief, wondering if his eyes are playing tricks on him, as sharp ice shards rain down around his panicked horse, completely disrupting his deadly spell. This spoiled noble struggles to maintain control, surrounded by the remnants of shattered ice, sweating profusely as he tries to comprehend how a mere slave could summon such magic. Suddenly, a heavy boot lands firmly on the dirt, accompanied by a mocking taunt. Colin emerges from the dust cloud completely unscathed, looking down on the noble with absolute disdain, leaving the surrounding Imperial soldiers to gasp in absolute horror at his miraculous survival. Fried grits his teeth in a mixture of rage and terror, convinced there must be some trick, screaming that it is absolutely impossible for a slave to wield such power. Determined to end this, Colin stands his ground and prepares to unleash another spell, but a sudden system notification warns him that his mana is completely depleted, forcing our protagonist to collapse to his knees as his body suddenly locks up, abandoning our protagonist to the mercy of Fried's crackling purple lightning. Colin groans in agony as the electrical currents begin to tear through his body, while the crazed noble screams for him to die, channeling even more destructive energy. This sheer force of the lightning strike overwhelms the young rookie, forcing a scream of pain, as he desperately wonders if his journey is going to end right here. Refusing to accept defeat after finally getting a second chance at life, his aura flares, prompting a dire system warning about the extreme risk of a magical rampage. Refusing to roll over and die, Colin unleashes a terrifying surge of dark blue flames, standing tall as the mysterious energy completely envelops his body in a blazing aura, while his system screen glitches out, unable to measure his suddenly off-the-charts magical stats. Even our protagonist is left completely stunned by this sudden, overwhelming transformation, clutching his head in agony as the unstable power threatens to tear him apart, realizing he only has a few precious moments left before his body completely breaks down. Determined to finish this, he leaps high into the air with a devastating battle cry, leaving Fried to stare up in pure horror at the impossible display of magic. This arrogant noble cannot even comprehend what kind of spell is descending upon him, as Colin brings his sword down with the force of a raging hurricane, clashing violently against the noble's desperate defenses in a massive explosion of ice and lightning, forcing Fried to shield his face as the shockwave shatters his magical barriers. But our boy is already preparing his next move before the dust can even settle. Locking his cold gaze onto his target, he moves with blinding speed, appearing directly behind the panicked master like a ghost in the night, which sends a cold shiver of absolute dread straight down the noble's spine. Fried desperately tries to raise his blade, realizing he is completely outmatched, but Colin's lightning-fast slash strikes true, sending the spoiled master flying off his horse. He crashes hard onto the dirt, cursing in rage as his absolute authority is shattered, while our exhausted protagonist stands victorious, breathing heavily as his blue flames continue to burn. Fried's eyes narrow as he realizes his opponent is pushing past his physical limits, but the desperate noble refuses to back down, channeling his crackling purple lightning once more, unleashing a smash electrical storm to completely vaporize the insolent slave once and for all, while Colin leaps straight into the chaos, his sword blazing with unstable blue fire. Shattered ice shards rain down around them as the young rookie descends like a meteor, screaming that this is the end while the panicked noble watches in absolute horror, delivering a devastating blow that shatters Fried's defenses and sends him flying backward, leaving both fighters gritting their teeth in a deadly clash of pure willpower. Suddenly, a massive golden magic circle erupts between them, completely blocking Colin's final strike, sending our protagonist flying back through the air from the sheer force of the barrier. At that exact moment, a powerful voice echoes through the clearing, demanding they stop immediately. It turns out to be Fried's father, Darius, who coldly reminds them this is a hunting ground, commanding the hot-headed rookies to save their petty squabbles for when they return home. This spoiled noble can only mutter in disbelief, while Colin glares back with his remaining strength. With the immediate danger gone, the young rookie's blue flames finally begin to fade away, prompting the powerful lord to stare down at him with deep, calculating curiosity, before Colin's exhausted body completely gives out, sending him face-first into the dirt. A few days later, a soft groan echoes through a luxurious, unfamiliar bedroom. Our protagonist slowly opens his eyes, completely disoriented as he tries to piece everything together, only to freeze in sheer shock as he remembers the terrifying power he unleashed. Colin bolts upright in bed, his heart pounding as he tries to process his surroundings, staring down at his hands as he realizes his regression to the past is undeniably real. But his deep thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a familiar voice welcoming him back to reality. Turning around, our protagonist is instantly startled by Daku's absolutely terrifying, sleep-deprived face, who offers a creepy, exhausted morning greeting that looks more like a threat than a welcome. This rookie explains that Colin completely passed out right after his chaotic duel with the noble, recounting how Captain Glenn personally carried him back while threatening the medics to save his life, prompting our boy to sweat drop at how incredibly dramatic his comrades can actually be. Feeling completely refreshed, Colin stretches his limbs and suggests they grab some food to celebrate, before pausing for a brief moment as a sudden realization crosses his mind. He flashes a bright, genuine smile and sincerely thanks Daku for looking out for him, leaving his partner completely speechless that the ruthless fighter actually possesses some basic manners. As the two rookies finally step outside to walk through the bustling estate streets, this surrounding soldiers immediately freeze up, staring at Colin with wide eyes and hushed whispers, which only makes our protagonist wonder what kind of problem these guys have with him. Nearby, a pair of gossiping maids whisper about the wild rumors surrounding him and Lord Fried, only for Colin to suddenly materialize right behind them, casually asking what they are discussing. Both terrified maids shriek in pure horror and immediately bolt down the street at full speed, as Daku dryly jokes that he is currently acting like a literal walking ghost. Colin merely smirks at the comparison, silently realizing his fearsome reputation is already working in his favor. Daku keeps teasing Colin about his pale face, prompting our annoyed protagonist to snap right back, but their petty bickering is suddenly cut short by the heavy thud of approaching boots, as a scarred, bald soldier with an eye patch sneers at them from behind with mock respect. This loudmouth mockingly calls Colin their wise and mighty future lord, trying to sound incredibly intimidating, only for both rookies to instantly scream at him to stay out of their conversation, forcing the startled veteran to quickly apologize before remembering he came here to settle a debt. Colin merely stares back with a cold, silent gaze that would make any normal man run, while the eye-patch soldier insists that Colin only won their last encounter by catching him off guard, confidently raising his hand to snap his fingers as he prepares to unleash his backup, declaring with absolute certainty that he will not make the same mistake twice this time. Our protagonist remains completely unfazed, watching the loudmouth make a total fool of himself in public, as the veteran dramatically calls out for his guard squad to execute their coordinated ambush. But absolutely nothing happens, leaving Colin to stare at him with pure, unadulterated secondhand embarrassment, while the bald soldier's confident smirk slowly melts into a nervous, sweating grimace of panic. He frantically snaps his fingers again, screaming at his men for ignoring their basic attack signal. But his terrified squad members refuse to budge, whispering that Colin is an absolute monster, leaving Daku to chuckle awkwardly while Colin looks increasingly bored by this pathetic display of leadership. Gritting his teeth, the humiliated veteran realizes he will lose all face if he backs down now, prompting him to shift his malicious gaze away from Colin and lock onto a new target, deciding that while he cannot handle our protagonist, he can easily take his nervous partner instead. This bald veteran suddenly grabs Daku by the collar, screaming about his betrayal of Lord Fried, leaving the nervous rookie completely helpless as the loudmouth rants about his absolute loyalty to the noble. But just as the angry soldier winds up a massive punch to deliver some street justice, Colin steps in and effortlessly catches the heavy fist, completely halting the attack in its tracks. Our protagonist glares back with icy eyes, coldly reminding the veteran he has no right to judge them, before casually slapping the man's hand away with absolute disdain, leaving him utterly speechless. This humiliated veteran can only sweat in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a mere slave dared to defy him. Suddenly, their tense standoff is interrupted by a booming voice demanding to know what the racket is about. Captain Glenn and his elite squad approach the scene, clearly annoyed that their morning meal was disrupted, prompting the bald soldier to smirk, foolishly believing the Royal Knights will now execute his petty revenge. He quickly drops to one knee with mock respect, eager to explain the situation to his superiors. Accusingly pointing a finger at the two rookies, he claims he was simply teaching them some basic manners. Instead of cowering in fear, Colin and Daku stand completely relaxed, even offering a casual wave, which immediately triggers the veteran's rage, prompting him to lunge forward to strike the insolent whelp, only for one of the Royal Knights to suddenly slap the loudmouth right across his face. Completely dumbfounded, the soldier clutches his cheek in absolute horror as his brain short-circuits. This elite knights completely ignore the veteran, playfully congratulating Colin on surviving his deadly duel, forcing the humiliated soldier to desperately wonder if he is trapped in some bizarre nightmare. He nervously stammers about the strict military rules regarding low-rank servants interacting with high-ranking officers. But the female knight grabs him from behind, coldly whispering that those rules mean absolutely nothing to them. Sarah leans in close, whispering a chilling threat that instantly silences the sweating veteran. Captain Glenn casually leads the group away, leaving the terrified loudmouth completely frozen in place. Colin offers a rare, genuine smile as he thanks the knights for stepping in once again. Soon after, the group gathers at a local tavern, clinking their heavy wooden mugs together. Our protagonist admits he originally came to express his gratitude, only to be rescued a second time. This female knight waves it off, admitting she gladly took the chance to humiliate the vice captain. Daku curiously asks if she had some personal history or unresolved issues with the bald veteran, but the fiery female knight instantly snaps, warning him not to ruin her perfectly good drink. Clearing his throat to break the tension, Captain Glenn commands the attention of the entire table. He explains that with their numbers depleted, they want both rookies to join the Royal Knights, sending Daku into a state of absolute shock while Colin calmly sips his beverage, especially since the captain promises they will receive the prestigious treatment of first-class servants. Without a single moment of hesitation, our protagonist politely declines the highly coveted offer, flashing a confident smirk as he reveals his sights are set on a much grander ambition. Refusing to settle for a mere servant rank, he stands firm on his decision, making it clear that his ultimate goal is nothing short of absolute power, leaving the veteran knight staring back at him in a heavy, stunned silence. This male knight suddenly snaps, angrily warning Colin not to get cocky after one lucky victory. Sarah merely busts out laughing, pointing out that his final strike was pure magic. She boldly theorizes that Colin used his mysterious blue flames to slay the king himself. This male knight sweats nervously, wondering how a mere former slave could possibly know anything about magic, while Captain Glenn turns his sharp gaze toward Colin, demanding a clear explanation for his mysterious abilities. Our protagonist remains outwardly calm, silently that he fully expected them to catch on eventually. Fortunately, he already prepared a perfect cover story to keep his dangerous secrets completely hidden. As Daku glances over with immense anxiety, desperately hoping his partner does not say something incredibly stupid, Sarah leans in with a knowing smirk, preparing to reveal her own wild theory about his past, pointing a dramatic finger directly at him as she confidently claims to know his true identity. Loudly declaring to the entire tavern that Colin is actually a disgraced former noble, she suddenly grabs his hands in excitement, completely convinced of her own ridiculous detective work, spinning a dramatic tale about an illegitimate child sold into slavery by a corrupt family conspiracy. Imagining him as a tragic hero destined to reclaim his lost power and exact bloody vengeance, Daku can only stare in absolute disbelief, wondering where on earth she came up with such nonsense. Suddenly, Colin bursts into a nervous laugh, instantly deciding to play along with her wild imagination, praising her sharp intuition while the female knight proudly gloats about the rotten nature of imperial nobles. Our boy even squeezes out a fake tear, claiming he was forced into slavery to survive a conspiracy, raising a dramatic fist as he vows to make his imaginary enemies pay for ruining his life, leaving Daku to silently pray that Captain Glenn is far too smart to buy this ridiculous performance. But the seasoned captain slams his hand down, completely falling for the lie and promising his silence. Glenn merely warns him to keep his magic hidden from the lady and the young master, before casually mentioning that the powerful Marquis has requested a private meeting with Colin immediately. Walking away from the encounter, Colin and Daku leave the veteran knights behind in the courtyard, while Glenn and his squad watch the two rookies depart with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. pondering the mysterious background of the young fighter who just defied a noble family. Inside the grand estate hallways, our protagonist quietly celebrates how easily his massive lie was accepted, prompting Deku to ask why he specifically chose Ale City for his fake noble origin. Colin explains that the distant city is a chaotic mess, making any official investigation nearly impossible, leaving his partner completely baffled by the sheer depth of his strategic planning and foresight. Suddenly, Deku shifts the conversation to another burning question that has been bothering him lately, raising three fingers as he asks about the meaning behind the mysterious three-legged crow symbol, wondering if it was just another clever trick designed to keep their enemies completely off balance. This question triggers a vivid memory of a brutal battle from their previous timeline together, where a massive demon held Deku hostage, forcing Colin to make a ruthless tactical decision, decapitating the beast in a single flash of steel before his partner could even process the danger, shouting that if Deku wanted to send a final message to his sister, he should do it himself. Our protagonist then lunged at the remaining armored monster, determined to end the threat once and for all. But as his blade struck home, the creature unleashed a sudden surge of volatile magical energy, coating the sharp steel in a terrifying shroud of crackling, unstable blue flames. This armored demon merely sneered in triumph, completely unfazed by the desperate strike of his opponent. Instantly, the mysterious blue fire backfired violently, completely engulfing Colin in a searing wave of pure agony, leaving him to scream in absolute torment as the destructive magic began tearing his body apart. This towering demon sneers down at them, completely mocking Colin's desperate attempt to end his life. But our protagonist refuses to back down, even as the massive beast looms over him with crushing force, while Deku suddenly recovers his footing, raising his blade to prove he is still in this fight. This unexpected defiance absolutely infuriates the monster, who roars in pure rage as blood drips from his fangs, only for both warriors to strike in perfect unison, delivering a devastating blow that finally brings the giant down, leaving Colin to catch his breath amidst the chaotic aftermath of their brutal, life-or-death struggle. As the remaining enemy forces swarm their position, the two rookies carve a bloody path through the horde. Yet Deku immediately ruins the heroic moment by complaining about Colin insulting his dramatic final words, sparking a ridiculous argument right in the middle of a battlefield surrounded by hostile monsters. This loudmouthed partner screams about the sheer recklessness of Colin's plan while slicing through another beast, prompting our protagonist to coldly point out that the enemy would have executed them anyway. They continue their petty bickering while effortlessly slaughtering every single monster that dares to approach them, leaving the rescued villagers to stare in absolute jaw-dropped bewilderment at their bizarre saviors. Even as they clash swords in a mock duel, Deku brings up Colin's embarrassing tears over Erika, which brings us back to the present, where Colin blinks in confusion at his partner's sudden gesture, as Deku proudly demonstrates a unique hand gesture he learned during his dark days in the Slave Association, explaining that this secret symbol of the three-legged crow will instantly identify them to any hidden allies. Though our protagonist looks incredibly skeptical as he clumsily attempts to replicate the awkward finger positions, this prompts Deku to realize that Colin is actually planning on getting captured again just to use it, while Colin casually shrugs it off, noting he learned the trick from a comrade who is already dead. Colin smiles warmly as he remembers the stubborn best friend who originally taught him that secret hand sign, leaving Deku to rack his brain trying to recall if such a slave ever existed in their past. But their quiet conversation is cut short by a firm knock on the heavy wooden door, prompting the two rookies to step inside the luxurious office where the powerful Marquise is waiting, who immediately asks Colin how he is recovering after his brutal, near-fatal battle in the woods. Our protagonist politely reassures the noble that he has completely recovered, offering a respectful smile, while Deku quickly bows to offer his formal greetings to the head of the prestigious family. This Marquise looks down solemnly, stating he brought them here to address a very serious matter, holding up official documents as he brings up the unauthorized incident in the royal hunting grounds, which instantly makes Deku sweat, fearing they are about to be severely punished for breaking the rules. But the older noble merely sighs, explaining his deep, lifelong connection to Captain Glenn and his squad. He gazes up at a massive portrait of his old comrades, recalling their many shared battles, admitting that he simply cannot imagine a world where he lost those precious friends to the monsters, before turning back to Colin to sincerely thank him for saving the lives of his knights. Deku bows his head in deep regret, lamenting that they could not save the other fallen soldiers. Yet the noble gently dismisses his guilt, firmly stating that neither of the rookies did anything wrong, taking full responsibility for the tragedy and blaming his own failure to predict the sudden monster ambush, before asking if they have reconsidered Glenn's offer to officially join the ranks of the elite knights. Without a moment of hesitation, Colin calmly declines the prestigious position, keeping his true ambitions hidden, leaving the surprised Marquise to shift his intense gaze to Deku, asking if he shares the same sentiment. This Marquise turns his attention to Deku, offering him a direct spot among his elite knights, sending the anxious rookie into a stuttering panic about whether he even deserves such an honor, as he silently wrestles with his own deep-seated insecurities and the weight of the sudden offer. Stealing his resolve, Deku suddenly shouts his acceptance, determined to finally prove his worth as a warrior. Turning back to Colin, the powerful noble asks if there is any other reward he desires instead, prompting our protagonist to calmly step forward while his ecstatic partner celebrates in the background. Colin requests the immediate transfer of Erika, Deku's sickly little sister, to the prestigious Hall family, catching his partner completely off guard and leaving him staring in absolute wide-eyed shock, since the two siblings have been forced to endure the hardships of slavery together for years. Knowing her fragile health, Colin explains that Daku deserves the chance to protect her in person. This Marquis listens intently, quietly asking if this selfless request is truly what Colin wants. Our boy simply smiles, stating he could never abandon a loyal comrade who fought by his side, which instantly brings tears of profound gratitude to his partner's eyes as the truth sinks in. Standing tall, Colin formally requests the noble to reunite the separated siblings once and for all. This heartfelt plea strikes a chord with the Marquis, reminding him of his own fallen comrades. He agrees to the transfer before dismissing Daku, warning that dealing with the Williams family takes time. Walking out of the grand office, Daku casts one final, deeply emotional look back at his savior, leaving Colin alone with the powerful noble as a heavy, expectant silence fills the luxurious room, until the Marquis suddenly asks if he remembers the day he boldly challenged Slace in the arena. It turns out the seasoned noble knew from that very moment that Colin was no ordinary slave. Darius points out that Colin surviving a magic attack completely unscathed was already highly suspicious. But what truly shocked the seasoned noble was the terrifying power Colin displayed during his duel with Freed, referring to that volatile dark blue magical energy that nearly consumed him in his past life. This older noble notes that a simple exiled noble trying to reclaim his status wouldn't need such dangerous power, prompting our protagonist to narrow his eyes as he realizes his cover story is already falling apart. Deciding to shift tactics, Colin casually summons a cluster of sharp ice crystals right in his palm, claiming he is far from a grand hero and merely possesses a basic grasp of magic, trying to play down his immense capabilities by labeling himself as just an ordinary person, while mockingly pointing out that his skills must seem completely trivial to a legendary Grand Master Mage. Darius stares at the floating ice shards, finding it incredibly hard to believe such a ridiculous excuse, demanding to know Colin's true identity as the young warrior suddenly shatters the frozen crystals, only for Colin to smoothly pivot, praising the Marquis as a beloved leader who values merit over bloodline. He draws his blade and presents it horizontally, expressing deep honor at being recognized by such a man, declaring his ultimate goal is to help the noble eradicate the corrupt system of bloodline supremacy. Dropping to one knee, our boy offers his sword in a dramatic pledge of absolute loyalty, before looking up with fierce determination as he boldly vows to one day surpass the Marquis himself. Colin promises to prove his worth in the upcoming selection test to repay the noble for saving his life, leaving the older man to quietly observe him, telling Colin to decide his path after the trial. Suddenly, Darius bursts into a booming laugh, thoroughly amused by the rookie's sheer audacity and ambition. Waving his hand to dismiss Colin, he is eager to see what the mysterious warrior will actually achieve. Colin politely asks to be excused, ready to wrap up this intense meeting with the Marquis. But just as our boy turns to leave, the older noble suddenly stops him in his tracks. Darius drops a completely unexpected question, asking what Colin thinks of someone named Rowan, leaving the young warrior looking entirely blank, having absolutely no idea who that is. Seeing this genuine confusion, the Marquis quickly dismisses the query and tells him he can go, which Colin gladly accepts, bowing respectfully before stepping out of the luxurious office. Once the doors close, Darius stares out the window and asks his hidden observer for their thoughts, summoning a mysterious man named Cornell, who slowly materializes from a shroud of dark magical energy. This shadowy advisor notes that if Colin is truly ordinary, he is an absolute genius, pointing out that his clueless reaction proves he definitely isn't a noble from Yale City, meaning they must remain highly vigilant against any potential ulterior motives he might have, especially since they have already dealt with a dangerous precedent in the past. This Marquis gazes solemnly at a framed portrait of a mysterious red-haired woman on his desk, while Cornell reaches into his coat to pull out a highly classified update, handing over a sealed letter that was just delivered by their secret spirit cat. Darius breaks the seal, eager to see what new intelligence his spies have gathered. Outside the estate, a calico cat quietly watches Colin through a high window. Back in his quarters, our protagonist marvels at the massive hoard of spoils he received, holding up a glowing purple crystal that will surely help skyrocket his magical strength. Yet he sits down in deep thought, wondering who this mysterious Rowan could actually be. Colin tries to recall the name Rowan, remembering he only heard it mentioned by Daku in his previous life. Yet the Marquis spoke of this mysterious person as if his identity should be completely obvious. Pushing the confusing thoughts aside, our boy prepares to examine the glowing purple liquid in his hands. Deciding he will grill his partner about it later, since preparing for the selection test is his top priority, he immediately downs the magical concoction, hoping to boost his reserves before the trials begin. Sitting quietly in his room surrounded by chests of gold and baskets of supplies, he takes a deep breath before focusing his mind and calling out to activate his secret magic tome, which instantly manifests in a brilliant swirl of glowing pages floating all around him, prompting the young warrior to chug another potion as he prepares to absorb its raw power, tossing the empty glass tube onto a growing pile of discarded flasks on the floor. Colin steels his resolve, knowing he must push his body to its absolute limits tonight. He channels the swirling energy directly into his core, commanding his system to absorb the magical properties, causing dark, pulsing veins to briefly ripple across his face from the sheer intensity of the process. As he grits his teeth and forces the volatile power to submit to his will, a glowing blue system notification confirms his success, showing his total mana has increased by a single point, though he laments that even high-grade monster core mixtures yield such incredibly pathetic results. Still, without a massive mana pool, he risks losing control of his dark magic just like before, leaving him with no choice but to down another vial of the foul-tasting medicine, gagging in pure disgust as he realizes his stomach might literally burst before he finishes them all, forcing our protagonist to desperately wonder if there is an easier way to reach his goal. A sudden system notification interrupts his thoughts, revealing he can craft a magic tool from the boss core. Holding the glowing blue orb, Colin realizes he might have found a shortcut to boost his stats. With a smirk, our boy taps the floating screen to begin the experimental crafting process. He channels his energy forward, a bright circular crest manifesting right over his clenched fist. Closing his eyes, the young warrior concentrates deeply to synchronize his mana with the core. Suddenly, a massive golden beast spirit holding a giant hammer materializes directly behind him. Following the system's precise instructions, he begins pouring his raw mana into the glowing sphere. This process requires him to visualize the exact shape of the tool he wants to create. Opening his eyes with a sharp blue glow, he instantly decides on the perfect design. This blue orb begins to crackle with intense energy, reshaping itself within his tight grip. Behind him, the golden Minotaur spirit roars, unleashing a torrent of fiery magical pressure. Colin commands the system to finalize the creation, triggering a massive explosion of golden light. Outside his quarters, a brilliant flash of energy briefly illuminates the quiet night sky. As the blinding aura slowly fades, the swirling magical currents settle back into his body. A new notification confirms the successful craft, revealing a sleek blue band wrapped around his wrist. This newly forged azure bracelet grants him a passive mana boost alongside a wild instinct effect. Looking at the stats, Colin grabs another potion flask to test if the buff actually works. He downs the purple liquid in one gulp, waiting to see how his body reacts. Sure enough, the system confirms his mana increased by 2 points instead of just 1. This handy bracelet doubles his potion absorption, making his grueling training grind a whole lot easier. Colin quietly wonders what this new wild instinct effect is actually supposed to do, but a sudden sigh from outside his door immediately cuts his thoughts short, instantly causing his eyes to flash with a strange glowing yellow light. Suddenly, the solid wooden door seems to fade into a transparent blue outline, revealing 2 exhausted maids stretching in the hallway, completely unaware they are being watched. He realizes this isn't simple X-ray vision, but rather a way to see energy, allowing him to easily track the guard squads patrolling the dark estate grounds, until he spots the Marquise and a chilling, disembodied voice whispers that it is hungry. This creepy voice catches him completely off guard, sending a shiver down his spine, prompting our boy to quickly spin around to find the source of the whisper. He scans the nearby servants, but their faint red outlines show no signs of speaking, and the patrolling guards are far too busy to be whispering in his ear. Looking up, his enhanced vision locks onto a massive swirl of white energy upstairs, drawing his attention to a luxurious room where an incredibly powerful presence resides. He peers inside to find a seated woman radiating a terrifyingly dense aura of mana. Suddenly, a dark silhouette within the room instantly senses his intrusive gaze, snapping open a massive blood-red eye that glares directly back at him, unleashing a wave of pure suffocating pressure that completely shatters his focus. Colin staggers backward in pain, clutching his chest as the mental backlash hits him, realizing in absolute shock that this monstrous entity easily detected his stealthy probe. Inside the luxurious room, Lady Angelica looks up from her book as her maid asks if she is all right, claiming a mere fly was bothering her, though she is actually Darius's second daughter, Angelica Hall. Colin immediately realizes that the creepy, hungry voice he heard earlier definitely did not belong to her, prompting our boy to push his limits and expand his search radius despite the mounting mental strain. Suddenly, his enhanced vision locks onto a distant, pleading signal, crying out for someone to find it. This mysterious distress call leads him straight toward the dark, dense forests surrounding the estate grounds, where a strange pulsing purple light begins to manifest deep within the shadowy trees, leaving him to wonder if he has stumbled upon a dangerous, demonic presence lurking nearby. Meanwhile, a formal knighthood ceremony is underway in the Grand Hall as a loyal warrior kneels before Darius, drawing bitter glares from a wealthy noblewoman and her son who clearly despise this sudden promotion. This entire court watches in silence as the Marquis prepares to bestow a highly prestigious title. Lowering his blade onto the young man's shoulder, Darius officially initiates the solemn ritual, while the resentful noblewoman watches, silently recalling the kneeling servant's tragic past as a commoner named Dak. She remembers how the Marquis first rescued the boy from the streets several years ago, only for the poor kid to be brutally whipped and displayed as a warning to other servants, serving as a convenient punching bag for her arrogant son, Freed, to abuse at his leisure. Freed would constantly pour wine over the helpless slave just to vent his own pathetic frustrations, forcing Dak to endure endless torment and humiliation without ever being allowed to fight back. Yet despite all the abuse, Darius smiles warmly as he prepares to change the boy's fate forever, officially declaring Dak as a newly recognized elite knight of the realm. Dak smirks with quiet satisfaction, finally tasting the sweet victory of his hard-earned promotion, while his fellow knights cheer loudly to celebrate his official induction into their elite ranks. But this joyous moment only deepens the bitter resentment festering inside the watching noblewoman. Turning her back on the celebration, she mutters about the natural order of social classes, her yellow eyes burning with absolute disgust at the thought of commoners rising above destiny. Suddenly, a porcelain teacup shatters against the cold floor as furious insults echo through the room, revealing a senior maid brutally pinning a helpless young servant named Erica under her heel. Watching the cruel display with complete indifference, Katrina casually snaps her fingers to signal the guards, demanding that this pathetic failure be punished immediately to maintain absolute discipline in her household. Screaming for mercy, the terrified girl is dragged away by her cold-hearted peers, who prepare a glowing red-hot iron brand to scar her face as a permanent lesson. Erika stares in absolute horror as the searing metal is brought closer to her skin, unleashing a blood-curdling shriek of agony that echoes through the dark corridors of the estate. Sometime later, Katrina pauses at her balcony when a sudden, desperate shout interrupts her thoughts, looking down to see Dak running toward the scarred girl and calling her his sister. This reminds her of the day Darius formally requested to bring Erika into their household, prompting her to give him a highly suspicious glare before demanding an explanation. Darius simply replied that he was fulfilling a crucial promise he had made to Colin. Back in the present, Dak happily reassures his sister, completely unaware of the eyes watching them, while Katrina glares down with pure hatred, disgusted that anyone would care about a mere servant. Up on the balcony, Fried angrily demands to know why his mother accepted the Marquis's terms, claiming that letting the matter slide will completely ruin their family's noble dignity. Katrina calmly sips her tea, mocking her son for losing to a commoner and embarrassing himself. Stuttering in embarrassment, the young noble desperately tries to make excuses for his pathetic defeat, but his mother's eyes flash with sudden murderous rage as she cuts him off, unleashing a terrifying burst of purple mana that rattles the entire stone balcony, screaming at her useless son to finally wake up and face reality. She slams her hand down, shattering the table and declaring that only beasts fight with beasts, sending a violent shockwave of raw magical pressure tearing through the nearby servants, who are instantly sliced by the razor-sharp wind, painting the floor in deep crimson. Fried gets blasted backward by the sheer force of her wrath, coughing up blood. This matriarch cold-bloodedly warns him that failing the upcoming selection test is absolutely not an option, since losing to a street rat would drag their entire household down to that level. Looking down at the courtyard, Fried spots Dak and Erika celebrating their reunion, while his mother coldly suggests letting the lowborn trash tear each other apart first. Her thoughts drift to Colin, the mysterious fallen noble who recently arrived from Ailey City, swearing she will personally eliminate him to protect the honor of House Hall. Sometime later, brilliant fireworks illuminate the sky as a massive crowd gathers for the trials, with spectators eagerly gossiping about the legendary kid who dared to humiliate the nobility. As Colin stands quietly among the competitors, ready to show them what he can do, Colin asks the butler about entering the dusk-deep forest to investigate that strange signal, but the old man explains that only the lord or official candidates can go inside, meaning Darius won't be handing out any special favors to our boy this time. Standing among the other hopefuls, Colin realizes he has to win this trial to get in, his enhanced vision locking onto the distant woods as his instincts flare up. That terrifying purple mana is definitely not human, and he needs to check it out. Suddenly, a heavy boot steps onto the grand stage to silence the whispering crowd, revealing the Marquis himself as he prepares to kick off the highly anticipated event, welcoming everyone to the brutal selection test that will decide their entire future. He reminds them that strength is the only thing that buys wealth and honor, raising his voice to announce the ultimate prize waiting for the sole survivor. This winner will officially earn the right to bear the prestigious name of House Hall. Next to him, Katrina steps forward with a smug grin, holding a golden family heirloom, explaining that the victory condition is simply finding this hidden ring within the venue, which clearly makes the Marquis break a sweat as he hands it over. This reminds him of their private deal when he asked to bring Erika into the household, where Katrina easily agreed to his request without putting up much of a fight, on one condition that would let her manipulate the upcoming trial to her liking. She demanded the right to design the test, planning a deadly trap for Colin, and now she gleefully declares that only one single ring exists for all of them. Katrina holds up the glowing ring, declaring there can only be one victor, as the heirloom floats in a swirl of purple magic, ready to be hidden, explaining that both the prize and the candidates will be teleported to random locations. Our boy stands ready as a glowing magic circle activates beneath his feet, while Darius raises his fist, shouting to officially kick off the brutal event, his voice echoing across the grand courtyard as Katrina watches with a smug expression, and with a final command, the teleportation magic flashes to send them away. Magic circles suddenly manifest all over the dense forest surrounding a smoking volcano, dropping the candidates from the sky as they are scattered across the dangerous terrain, and Colin lands gracefully on his feet, kicking up a cloud of dust, looking around as bitter memories of his past suffering in these woods resurface. Back in the Grand Hall, the magical projection screens show that the transfer is complete, leaving the anxious spectators to murmur about the deadly trials their children must face, while the nobles sit comfortably on their thrones, eagerly waiting to watch the slaughter. But deep in the woods, a candidate happily loots a sword from a skeleton, and another finds an old crossbow, confident that these weapons will give him the edge. Completely unaware that Colin is calmly walking nearby, totally unfazed by the danger, suddenly the two armed hunters spot him and launch a coordinated ambush from the trees, firing a lethal crossbow bolt directly at his head with absolute murderous intent. But Colin effortlessly dodges, a tiny scratch on his cheek only making him smirk. This sword-wielding hunter lunges forward with a wild slash, but Colin effortlessly leans back to dodge, Dancing through a flurry of desperate strikes, our boy casually tells them to slow down, realizing he has absolutely no time to waste on these low-level thugs. This furious attacker slashes wildly, burying his blade deep into a thick tree trunk instead, while his partner scans the dense forest, completely losing track of their target. Colin crouches silently on the other side of the bark, letting them waste their energy. Suddenly, a sharp crossbow bolt thuds into the wood just inches from his face, prompting the smug hunters to laugh, thinking they finally have him cornered. They step forward to deliver a final blow, promising him a quick and painless end, but our boy just smirks, coldly replying that they are the ones who are finished. He points a finger at his attackers, telling them to check their own hands, and they look down in horror to see writhing purple veins pulsing under their skin. Panic instantly sets in as they scream, feeling something alive squirming inside their flesh, which Colin explains is the price for stealing weapons off dead bodies in this forest. A grotesque red centipede crawls out of the skeleton known as the heart-eating poison bug, a parasite that slowly hollows out its host before seeking its next victim, and Colin's chilling smile makes it clear they fell right into a deadly trap. Terrified and desperate, the sword-wielding hunter raises his blade to drag Colin down with them. But our boy quickly raises his hands, telling them to wait because there is still hope, revealing his own scarred palm to prove that he was infected by the bugs too. Colin casually pulls out a glowing blue vial, claiming he managed to find a cure, offering to hand over the precious antidote if they agree to let him walk away. This desperate hunters quickly whisper a plan to play along and kill him once they are cured, greedily demanding that our boy hand over the medicine right this instant. Colin sighs dramatically, acting as if he is struggling with a highly difficult decision, before casually pointing out that the vial only contains a single dose. A heavy silence falls over the two partners as the terrifying reality of his words sinks in, instantly shattering their fragile alliance as they turn on each other with murderous accusations. Years of teamwork vanish in a second as they draw their weapons, screaming bitter insults at one another, both of them completely consumed by panic as they beg to receive the life-saving cure. Watching the pathetic display with absolute satisfaction, Colin decides to play his final card, tossing the glowing vial directly into the hands of the ecstatic crossbow hunter. This man barely has time to gasp out a word of thanks before his vision suddenly spins, as his greedy partner ruthlessly cuts him down from behind to steal the cure for himself. Catching the falling vial with a triumphant grin, the surviving hunter celebrates his bloody betrayal, chugging the blue liquid down in a desperate bid to save his own skin. Tossing the empty glass aside, he immediately points his blood-stained blade back at our boy, laughing maniacally about the massive reward Katrina will give him for delivering Colin's head. Colin just smiles, noting that sending a signal to the matriarch was always their true objective, before revealing that the supposed antidote was actually just regular water he scooped from the ground. Colin laughs and wipes his hand, revealing the supposed infection was actually just a bit of dirt, leaving the surviving hunter absolutely speechless as he realizes he fell for a complete bluff. And in a blind rage, the man lunges forward to slice our boy to pieces. But he suddenly freezes, coughing up a torrent of dark blood as his body fails him, crashing hard onto the dirt while Colin watches his pathetic struggle with total indifference. Turns out, the entire forest is heavily contaminated, meaning that ordinary puddle water was highly toxic, with our boy coldly advising him to be far more careful about accepting free drinks. As the dying hunter chokes out a final useless threat about his family's vengeance, which Colin completely ignores as he casually slides the valuable ring off the corpse's finger, smiling at how easily his enemies handed over such a useful prize without a fight, before waving a sarcastic goodbye to the dead man and walking deeper into the woods. While wild beasts slither through the dense undergrowth, the atmosphere grows increasingly tense, prompting Colin to pull up his dark hood to blend into the shadows, eventually arriving at a creepy, ruined stone tunnel surrounded by scattered human remains, where a demonic skull carved above the archway glows with an ominous green light. Staring at the entrance, Colin mutters that he has finally found the right place, stepping past the ancient bones as he calmly ventures into the pitch-black cavern, completely unfazed by the grim warning signs littering the stone floor beneath his boots. Behind him, a cracked skull suddenly flares with a sinister purple flame, because the dead are beginning to rattle and rise, ready to tear him apart. Colin walks deeper into the stone ruins, noting that the dark corridors look exactly as he remembers, but a sudden, echoing shout from the darkness ahead forces him to halt in his tracks, prompting our boy to narrow his eyes as he realizes someone else has already entered the cavern. Around the corner, Erica Williams stands completely surrounded by a ruthless gang of heavily armed candidates, her breath catching as she tightly grips her sword, refusing to show any signs of weakness, while her fierce blue eyes lock onto her tormentors with absolute defiance despite the overwhelming odds. Leaping forward with a desperate battle cry, she vows to fight them until her very last breath, only for a cold spearman to easily block her path, scoffing at her futile struggle. A brutal kick from another attacker sends her crashing backward, knocking the wind right out of her, and a massive brute immediately swings a heavy stone hammer down to crush her spirit, forcing her to roll away desperately as the impact shatters the stone floor beneath her. Before she can recover, a heavy boot stomps directly onto her back, pinning her to the dirt, as the smug leader demands she reveal the location of her ally without wasting any more time. He gestures coldly to the bloodied bodies of her fallen companions scattered across the cold floor. But Erika just glares back, spitting that she would never betray her friends to their faces. This cruel leader merely smirks at her loyalty, deciding it is time to change his tactics, grabbing her arm and twisting it behind her back to force the information out of her. Watching silently from the shadows, Colin observes the brutal interrogation as Erika screams out in agony, recognizing these pathetic attackers as nothing more than trash sent by the corrupt House of Williams. While the young girl gasps for air, tears of pain streaming down her bruised face. Erika looks up through her tears, completely unaware that Colin is watching her from the shadows, but our boy decides it is best to slip away and avoid any unnecessary trouble. Unfortunately, her desperate cry for help echoes through the cavern, forcing him to halt with a sigh. Suddenly, one of the armed thugs spots his movement and demands to know who he is, prompting Colin to step forward with a fake smile, claiming he is not their enemy. This suspicious leader assumes he is with the House of Williams, warning him to back off. While Erika stares up in silence, her bruised face stained with tears of hopeless desperation. Colin casually adjusts his dark hood, pretending to agree to their terms to lower their guard. But a massive brute steps up behind him, sensing that something is seriously off. This brute narrows his eyes, noticing the valuable ring on our boy's finger, aggressively grabbing Colin's shoulder to force him to turn around and show his face. This rest of the gang watches intently, waiting to see who this mysterious intruder is. But they are completely unprepared for how quickly the situation is about to turn deadly. Colin drives a hidden blade deep into the brute's stomach, whispering that they left him no choice, his hood falling back to reveal a pair of cold, murderous blue eyes, and with a swift slash, he sends the giant crashing down as the thugs recognize him. Realizing they are facing the infamous brat from the rumors, the remaining hunters draw their weapons. But Colin is already moving like a shadow, his blade flashing through the dim light, ruthlessly tearing through the throat of the masked swordsman before he can even react, and launching a brutal kick to send another attacker flying as the bloodbath officially begins. Colin easily sweeps through the remaining thugs, leaving them groaning on the cold stone floor. This angry leader draws his blade, cursing our boy for interfering in their business, but his smug attitude instantly vanishes as a cold steel blade presses against his throat. Erika delivers a brutal slash from behind, catching the leader completely off guard with her sudden strike, standing victoriously over his falling body as Colin watches her with quiet surprise. Her fierce blue eyes lock onto him, reflecting his shadowed silhouette in the dim light. Suddenly, she lunges forward with her sword raised, charging directly toward our boy, who effortlessly tilts his head to dodge the incoming blade without breaking a sweat, only to realize her target was actually a sneaky thug trying to ambush him from behind. With the final attacker down, Erika collapses to the ground, completely drained of her remaining strength. Colin looks down at her with genuine respect, admitting that she is actually pretty good, prompting the young girl to burst into tears of pure relief after surviving the nightmare. She gently covers the bloodied faces of her fallen companions with their dark cloaks, kneeling before the three bodies to offer a quiet prayer for their souls. Watching her mourn, Colin decides to break the heavy silence with a practical question, asking her why those thugs were targeting her group in the first place. Erika sniffles and explains that the attackers were desperately searching for a guy named Colin, crying as she reveals they tortured and killed her friends because she couldn't give them answers. Our boy freezes in pure awkward guilt, realizing he is the sole reason her friends died, before she wipes her tears, wondering if it is truly okay for him to fight his own house. Colin sweat drops, casually admitting he never actually got along with his family anyway, explaining he only joined this deadly test to escape them before waving a quick goodbye. But before he can take a single step, a desperate hand suddenly grabs his wrist. As Erika begs him to let her tag along and help him on his journey, our boy just stands there in dead silence, staring at her with utter disbelief, dryly asking what someone who was just crying on the floor could possibly do. She snaps back that she only panicked because she watched her companions get brutally murdered, but their argument is cut short by a heavy dragging footstep echoing nearby. A pale man in a dark coat stumbles forward, prompting Colin to ask if he's another friend, only for Erika to shake her head as the stranger lets out a guttural, inhuman groan. This young girl gasps in horror as she catches a glimpse of his terrifying face, watching the man's eyes flare with a sinister purple light as he screeches into the dark. Reacting instantly, Colin lunges forward and drives a sharp dagger straight through the monster's jaw, yet the creature doesn't even flinch, standing tall with the blade still impaled in its skull. It merely groans as bones crack, completely ignoring the lethal wound like it was nothing. Grabbing Erika's hand, Colin yells at her to run before things get even worse, while the monster casually reaches up and pulls the steel blade right out of its head, leaving the terrified girl to scream in confusion about why the damn thing won't die. Colin explains that they are dealing with a corpse controlled by a parasitic death puppet worm, which will keep fighting relentlessly until they manage to destroy the main body hiding inside. Colin explains that the parasitic monster drains its host's blood to create a mindless walking corpse, leading Erika deeper into the dark corridors as they try to stay one step ahead. But the real problem is that these parasites share a hive mind connection, meaning the entire horde instantly knows exactly where their prey is hiding, sending a massive wave of glowing-eyed monsters rushing straight down the stone hallway. Suddenly, a heavy footstep echoes nearby, forcing the duo to halt in their tracks, as a formidable zombie commander in a tattered military uniform steps out of the shadows. Colin sighs, muttering that these persistent pests are starting to get on his nerves, quietly calculating the quickest way to ditch his companion and escape through a hidden passage. but the young girl suddenly smirks, completely misinterpreting the severity of the situation. She boasts that she is no longer afraid now that she understands how they work, twirling her twin daggers while our boy warns her that the parasites copy their host's abilities. Dismissing his concerns, she smiles warmly and tells her savior not to worry, arguing that these decaying, wrecked bodies could never utilize their original skills properly anyway. Introducing herself as Luna, she casually asks for his name as they face the horde, prompting Colin to quickly sweat drop and adopt the fake alias of Clark to protect his identity. Luna drives her blades into the ground, confidently promising to be the one protecting him this time, clasping her hands together to channel a massive surge of holy energy, which unleashes a blinding aura that makes Colin realize she is actually an advanced-level swordswoman, ready to sever the dark shackles and guide these wandering souls back to where they belong. Luna locks her glowing blue eyes onto the approaching threat, ready to unleash her full power, as the massive horde of glowing-eyed corpses rushes down the corridor with mindless, bloodthirsty rage. But she immediately unleashes a devastating cross-slash of holy energy that tears them to pieces. Standing tall amidst the fading light, she confidently readies her twin blades for the next wave, prompting Colin to quietly admit that she actually possesses some serious combat skills after all. Suddenly, a sneaky zombie leaps out of the shadows behind him with its weapon raised, only for our boy to effortlessly block the incoming strike without even turning around, ruthlessly slicing the monster in half while noting that these trial grounds offer absolutely no mercy. At that exact moment, his eye flares as his system detects a sudden surge of mana. Meanwhile, Luna continues to carve her way through the endless sea of monsters with absolute confidence, determined to ride this momentum and completely wipe out the remaining horde in one go. She leaps high into the air, aiming a lethal strike directly at the zombie commander's head, bringing her twin blades down with enough force to shatter solid stone. But the formidable commander casually blocks her attack with a glowing shield of red energy. Luna's eyes widen in pure shock as she realizes her physical attacks are completely useless, gasping in horror as she watches the decaying corpse actively channel high-level offensive magic. She desperately slides backward to create some distance, muttering that this should be completely impossible, only for the ground beneath her feet to suddenly erupt with jagged stone spikes, trapping her ankle in a solid rock vise and leaving her completely vulnerable to an attack. This zombie commander lets out a terrifying roar, charging up a lethal spell to finish her off. This zombie commander unleashes a massive stone fist, sending Luna crashing violently to the ground. She struggles to sit up, coughing as her body takes a heavy beating from the impact, but her eyes instantly widen in sheer horror as she looks at the approaching horde. Recognizing the decaying faces of her fallen comrades, she realizes they have all been reanimated, leaving her completely paralyzed with grief as she stares at her former friends. Tears stream down her face, unable to accept that they have turned into mindless monsters. Suddenly, a sharp blade pierces straight through one of the zombies' skulls. As Colin steps in to do the dirty work she is too traumatized to handle, he ruthlessly carves through the reanimated corpses, showing absolutely no hesitation against her dead friends, shouting at her to snap out of it before she gets herself killed. Luna suddenly gasps in agony as dark parasitic veins begin spreading rapidly across her face, desperately calling out his fake name as the surrounding monsters close in on her. Colin spins around to help, only to find his path blocked by a massive shadow, while his system warns him of an incredibly high concentration of mana nearby. A towering construct of electrified stone rises up, threatening to crush him in an instant, forcing our boy to quickly swing his blade and shatter the incoming magical attack. It turns out the parasite is utilizing a powerful mage's corpse to cast high-level spells. Pushing past the magical onslaught, Colin dashes forward to slice down the remaining threats, just as Luna finally collapses from the overwhelming pain of the parasitic infection. He catches her limp body, realizing the death puppet worm is already trying to claim its next host. Colin narrows his eyes, realizing he needs to make a quick exit before they get completely overwhelmed, especially with the massive horde of glowing-eyed monsters closing in from all sides. Holding the unconscious girl tightly, our boy prepares to buy himself just enough time to escape, throwing a precise strike that hits the zombie commander directly in the face. This blade misses the parasite's core, merely pinning itself into the stone wall behind the beast, which only angers the undead leader as it continues its relentless charge down the corridor. Our boy just smirks at their mindless rage, bidding the monsters a very sarcastic farewell, before slipping through a hidden rotating stone door to leave the horde behind. Sliding down a steep, rocky chute, he keeps a firm grip on his infected companion, leaping off the edge to plunge directly into the deep, freezing waters below. Luna remains completely unconscious, the dark parasitic veins still spreading slowly across her pale skin. Sometime later, Colin sits quietly by a warm campfire, brewing a strange concoction in a pot, when the young girl suddenly bolts upright, screaming in terror about the reanimated corpses. A cold steel blade instantly presses against her throat, freezing her in place, as she looks up to find her savior staring down at her with intense suspicion. He carefully inspects her face, noting the faint dark tint around her brow and lips, realizing she is indeed parasitized but somehow keeping her mind perfectly intact. This young girl blinks in confusion as he explains they are safe in the lower levels, watching him walk back to the fire while she tries to process her surroundings. He hands her a steaming wooden bowl, bluntly telling her to drink it up. Colin hands her a bowl of boiled herbs, explaining it will only delay her inevitable transformation. Looking down at the steaming, foul-smelling brew, Luna realizes her time is rapidly running out. She quietly asks if she is doomed to become one of those mindless beasts eventually, but instead of giving up, she desperately chugs the bitter medicine down in one go. Her face instantly contorts in pure disgust as she struggles to keep the foul liquid down. Proudly slamming the empty bowl down, she demands they move, though Colin dryly asks where to, prompting her to argue that finding the trial's ring is still their primary objective. She stretches her limbs, determined to make the most of the time she has left, even offering to distract the incoming horde so her savior can make a clean break, only for our boy to calmly look her in the eye and refuse to leave. Luna stands completely frozen in shock, unable to comprehend why he would risk his life, while Colin points to the rushing stream, revealing his escape route was always right here. But before they take another step, he points his wooden ladle and asks a heavy question, demanding to know if she truly has the resolve to slaughter her reanimated companions. This young girl looks away, quietly admitting that she has no idea if she can, explaining that the fallen mages were actually her beloved childhood friends who dreamed of greatness. As memories of their happy, peaceful days back in the village flash before her eyes, tears stream down her face as she laments how their golden opportunity turned into a nightmare, unable to accept that they were reduced to mindless puppets controlled by disgusting parasites, leaving Colin to silently watch her weep, understanding the brutal pain of her impossible choice. Colin looks down at the weeping girl, reminding her that tears prove she still has a heart, before adding with a confident smirk that they actually aren't completely out of options yet. Luna quickly wipes her eyes in surprise, turning around to ask what he could possibly mean. Our boy explains that these death puppet worms share a unique trait called dual mother symbiosis, meaning that killing the queen mother will instantly destroy every single parasite, including the one inside her. Hearing this, the young girl immediately hardens her resolve and vows to fight alongside him, confidently declaring she is no longer afraid, though Colin quickly raises a finger to interrupt her, pointing back toward the campfire and telling her she must drink the rest of that foul brew. He stands there waiting, completely ignoring her sudden look of absolute dread as she stares at the pot, prompting Luna to shriek in horror at the thought of chugging down the entire bitter concoction. When she tries to protest, Colin simply shrugs and tells her to forget the whole plan, forcing her to quickly change her mind and chase after him as he walks away. Sometime later, they navigate a dark corridor covered in thick cobwebs while giant spiders crawl nearby. As Colin warns her to stay close since the Queen's maze is easy to get lost in, Luna asks if he plans to fight a level 3 monster head-on, leaving our boy completely confused. Brushing aside the sticky webs, he admits he has absolutely no idea what these levels actually mean. So she explains that the Empire ranks all monsters within its borders based on their overall strength. She details how harmless beasts are level 1, while higher levels require serious combat skills to defeat, which makes Colin realize that the standard parasites they fought earlier were likely only level 2, leaving Luna to wonder how such a low-level creature could have cast such powerful magic. Colin waves off her concerns, casually suggesting the parasite simply took over a noble and copied their abilities. But Luna immediately rejects this, arguing that nobles are divine beings protected by God and immune to parasites. Our boy asks if she's implying the attack wasn't magic, but rather some innate beastly power instead, though she insists magic is a sacred gift from God, always accompanied by a holy sigil when cast. As they keep moving, Colin realizes her description of a divine sigil is just a standard magic circle, while Luna explains that high-tier abilities belong to level 4 and 5 monsters, which are completely fatal, prompting Colin to offer a very awkward smile as he tries to play along with her explanation, silently recalling how he effortlessly thrashed those exact high-level beasts just a couple of days ago. He wonders aloud if the Empire's ranking system is simply wrong, but she warns him not to blaspheme, leading our boy to smirk and ask if God was the one who made a mistake instead. This completely crosses the line for the young girl, who snaps in anger and demands he shut up, her eyes burning with rage as she accuses him of actively insulting her sacred creator. Colin quickly raises his hands in mock surrender, realizing he pushed her religious buttons a bit too hard, muttering a quick apology to diffuse the tension while she continues to glare daggers at his back. He presses a hidden stone brick on the wall, admitting there is still one massive logical loophole, pointing out that if these disgusting parasitic worms can cast magic, they must also be God's envoys. He steps through the newly opened passage, casually questioning if the power of magic itself is actually not exclusive to divine beings at all, delivering a massive blow to her lifelong beliefs. Luna collapses to her knees in absolute despair, desperately clinging to her crumbling faith in the darkness, her glowing eyes wide with horror as she realizes her entire holy worldview might be a lie. Colin suddenly chops her on the head, cutting off her existential crisis with a sharp tap. He tells her to save the theological debate for after they slay the death puppet queen, leading the way deeper into the damp caverns while she struggles to keep pace. Stopping by a stash of old barrels, our boy announces they have found their secret weapon, which Luna quickly inspects only to gag at the overwhelming stench of strong alcohol. She looks around the dusty storage room, noticing stacks of charcoal piled high in the corner, realizing with sheer disbelief that his grand plan involves setting the entire nest ablaze. Luna immediately protests the idea, insisting that a simple fire will never be enough. arguing that a level 3 boss is far too powerful to be defeated by basic flames. But Colin just chuckles at her doubts, completely unfazed by her frantic warnings. He pulls out a mysterious glowing vial, hinting that he has a few extra ingredients prepared, before they finally arrive in front of a massive, heavily reinforced wooden gate. Ominous green energy pulses from the cracks, confirming the queen is waiting just on the other side, prompting the young girl to anxiously ask how they are supposed to bypass such a barrier. Colin casually unsheathes his basic dagger, dryly suggesting they simply break their way through, unleashing a blinding high-speed slash that strikes the reinforced wood with explosive force. Luna laughs nervously, assuming his weak weapon could never pierce such a thick defense, only for the massive gate to instantly shatter into a million tiny black splinters. She stares in absolute, brain-dead silence, unable to comprehend how a simple dagger did that, as they quietly step into a dark, web-covered corridor littered with glowing green parasite eggs. Walking deeper into the damp cavern, they pass rows of glowing green parasite eggs lining the walls. But as they navigate the narrow ledge, a pale corpse floating in the dark water catches their attention. This lifeless body is covered in deep cuts, drifting silently beneath the cold stone pathway. Luna stares down in absolute horror, her face turning pale as she recognizes the fallen warrior, though Colin quickly urges her to keep moving forward before she can spiral into panic. Stepping into a massive chamber, they find a heavily armored warrior sitting on a throne of eggs, which turns out to be the death puppet queen itself, muttering a chilling demand for meat. Its glowing purple eyes flare with mindless hunger, locked onto the fresh prey that just walked in. While Luna panics over a talking corpse, Colin calmly explains the parasite simply mimics its host's voice. But the beast is already drawing its massive blade, crackling with a terrifying surge of energy. Luna inspects the high-grade armor, suddenly realizing this host was once a legendary warrior in the Empire. This possessed swordsman raises the lightning-infused blade high, preparing to unleash a devastating high-speed strike, forcing Colin to grab his companion and leap backward as a massive energy wave tears through the room. Shielding her from the explosive shockwave, he watches the dust clear while she admits her warnings were right. Our boy narrows his eyes at the enemy, instantly recognizing the legendary prodigy of the Hall family, who was once hailed as the strongest swordsman in the Empire before falling to the parasites. This legendary king of the sword now glares at them, eagerly whispering about taking a brand new body. It turns out these trial grounds were originally built as a secret domain to select the family's heir, a hidden realm forged over generations to gather the most dangerous monsters and priceless treasures. But now, only the mindless corpses of those who failed the trial remain to wander the darkness. Luna recalls how this legendary warrior was a peerless swordsman who surprisingly couldn't use any magic, which sparked endless rumors to ruin his name despite his absolutely flawless combat skills. Now, that legendary swordsman stands before them as a mindless puppet radiating dark purple energy, leaving the young girl completely paralyzed with fear as she recognizes the fallen hero. Colin casually asks if it is really so hard to believe a parasite took him down, explaining that the beast likely wore him out with lesser minions before striking his blind spot. After all, even the most powerful nobles are still fragile humans underneath their fancy titles, prompting our boy to suggest they finally put this tragic legend out of his misery. Luna narrows her eyes, locking her gaze onto the monster as she prepares for battle. Meanwhile, the possessed warrior mocks their hesitation, asking if they are trembling in absolute terror, raising his glowing blade to summon a deadly array of floating energy swords above them. Colin warns his companion to brace herself as the enemy prepares to unleash his ultimate technique, and with a deafening roar, the puppet unleashes a devastating barrage of dark energy slashes. This duo narrowly dodges the explosive shockwaves as the deadly attacks tear up the stone floor. Seizing his chance, our boy draws his basic dagger and prepares to launch a swift counterattack, activating a high-speed footwork technique to completely throw off the giant monster's perception. Multiple illusionary copies of Colin suddenly swarm the swordsman from every single angle, but the legendary warrior instantly realizes it is just a trick to hide his real body. He tracks the true attack and effortlessly catches the incoming blade with his armored hand, crushing the weak weapon into tiny pieces while mocking Colin's pathetic attempt to strike him. This possessed warrior easily crushes Colin's dagger, mocking his pathetic tricks as completely useless. Terrified by the monster's overwhelming power, Luna desperately prays for divine protection in the dark. She courageously leaps into the fray, swinging her blade to draw the beast's attention away, but the legendary swordsman effortlessly blocks her strike, calling her far too slow. Luna gasps in absolute shock as she realizes her best attack didn't even leave a scratch, and with a brutal counterswing, the puppet sends her crashing hard onto the stone floor. Seizing the distraction, Colin dashes in from behind to launch a surprise assault of his own, his eyes glowing with cold focus as he readies a brand new blade for the strike, unleashing a blindingly fast slash that forces the armored giant to spin around and defend, though the monster quickly retaliates with a devastating downward swing of his massive sword. Their weapons collide with explosive force, locking the two fighters in a desperate struggle of strength, prompting the parasite to smirk as it praises Colin's incredible reflexes and durable body, before shoving him back and declaring that our boy is the perfect new vessel to possess. Colin simply grins in response, completely unfazed by the creature's creepy threats as he prepares his next move, leaping high into the air to rain down a barrage of throwing daggers from above. This legendary swordsman easily deflects them all, mocking Colin for repeating the same useless tactics, only to freeze when a strange pungent liquid suddenly splashes all over his golden helmet. Realizing with sudden dread that the thrown bottles were actually filled with highly flammable booze, a massive explosion instantly erupts, engulfing the possessed warrior in a raging torrent of fire, leaving the burning puppet to scream in agony while Colin casually holds up his secret potion vial. Colin explains his unique style blends truth with illusion, making the weapon he holds completely irrelevant, with the possessed warrior burning as its decaying host body rapidly reaches its absolute limit. Our boy smirks at the monster's confusion, his mind drifting back to his previous life, recalling a hidden resistance camp where desperate survivors struggled to find a way to fight back. Back then, his old comrades examined a strange mixture that smelled like standard alcohol, until a veteran miner explained they had secretly added highly volatile sparkstones to the brew, revealing that even the slightest physical impact would cause the crushed stones to ignite instantly, creating a massive uncontrollable blaze that they originally used for heavy mining under noble orders. Many workers died from misjudging the volatile mixture, yet they kept digging in hopes of a reward, only for those cowardly nobles to abandon them the second the demon threat arrived. Determined to survive, the veteran was confident this crude weapon could bring down even high-tier demons, proudly holding up the finished prototype to show off the sheer resilience of the working class, prompting the young soldiers to wonder what kind of name they should give this deadly creation. Returning to the present, Colin wears a dark grin as he readies the exact same recipe, hurling the explosive vials forward while calling out the legendary name of Heaven's Punishment. A spectacular blast completely consumes the chamber, tearing through the stone and engulfing their enemy, leaving the legendary swordsman reeling in absolute shock from the overwhelming power of the explosion. This burning puppet struggles to stand, completely unaware that the real trap has just been sprung, as Luna suddenly leaps into the fray, hurling even more volatile mixtures directly at the beast, while Colin calmly notes that the mother bug will always stay behind to protect her nest. Colin hands Luna a volatile potion, instructing her to wipe out the surrounding parasite larvae, and a massive explosion instantly rocks the chamber, earning a quick word of praise from our boy. As the raging fire quickly consumes the nest, bursting the glowing green eggs into tiny pieces, Luna steals her resolve, declaring they must destroy this abomination to protect the dignity of the divine. But a heavy, armored boot steps out of the smoke as the monster growls in fury, glaring at them through his golden visor for daring to harm his precious children. While Colin's system suddenly detects a surge of mana, catching him completely off guard, as the possessed warrior draws a massive blade crackling with intense fiery energy. This legendary swordsman channels the flames, swearing to burn both of them to absolute ashes, leaving Luna in disbelief that a warrior who supposedly lacked magic is now wielding it, while the puppet roars in agony as dark red veins of energy pulse through his armor, unleashing a violent shockwave of pure fire that shakes the entire cavern to its core. With massive wings of flame flaring behind him, the beast warns them to prepare themselves, launching himself high into the air to strike Colin down with a devastating aerial assault, leaving our boy to barely react in time, taking a shallow cut as the blazing sword slices past, grimacing in pain as he realizes there is something incredibly wrong with this monster's mana, pulling up the enemy's stats only to find his magic talent is actually listed as extremely low, leaving him shocked that mere beginner-level magic could produce such terrifying power as he yells for Luna to strike, prompting the young girl to leap down from above with a fierce battle cry, unleashing a devastating spinning slash that tears through the cavern to end this nightmare once and for all. Luna confidently drives her blade forward, believing the monster is finally vulnerable after losing its defense, but her confidence instantly shatters when the glowing purple energy around the armor begins to violently surge, leaving both of them speechless as the single possessed warrior suddenly splits into multiple identical clones, who surround our heroes while radiating an overwhelming pressure that completely fills the room. While the main puppet mocks their shock, asking if they honestly believe the fight was already over. Luna trembles in absolute disbelief at this impossible technique, her mind struggling to comprehend the multiplying threat. Even Colin admits he has never seen such a bizarre and dangerous skill in his entire life. And as the clones leap high into the air, our boy desperately warns his companion to watch out, only for another copy to materialize right behind him to launch a lethal surprise attack of its own. Reacting in a split second, Colin activates his frozen ice magic to conjure a solid defensive barrier, trapping the incoming blade in a thick block of frost that rapidly spreads across the enemy's armor, before shattering the frozen clone into countless harmless shards with a powerful burst of mana. Though the remaining clones only laugh at his efforts, boasting that the Golden Sword King is completely immortal, a legendary warrior who simply cannot be killed by mere mortals wandering into his domain. They mock the weakness of humanity, declaring that no matter how many times they fall, they will rise again, unleashing a coordinated, devastating sword technique to completely obliterate Colin's position in a flash of red light. Yet, as the dust settles, the main puppet's glowing purple eyes twitch in sudden confusion, realizing with a shock that the target he just struck was nothing but an empty ice decoy, looking around the silent chamber only to find that the young girl has also completely vanished, leaving the frustrated monster to grip his blade tightly while wondering if his prey actually managed to escape. This possessed warrior roars as he channels a massive surge of fiery energy into his blade, unleashing a devastating explosion of flames that completely tears through the ancient stone chamber. Colin barely manages to pull Luna back, holding her steady as she gasps for breath, realizing that this monster's terrifying power is light years beyond any normal beginner-level magic. His mind races to figure out how a magicless warrior could wield such destructive force, but his thoughts are cut short when Luna suddenly coughs up a spray of blood. Gently lowering her to the cold stone floor, our boy asks if she can still stand, while the young girl weakly apologizes for failing to do more in this desperate fight. Colin reassures her, blaming himself for thinking his explosive potion would be enough to end it. Noticing the dark purple veins of the parasite rapidly spreading across her pale neck, he tells her to stay put and rest while he handles the beast alone, though Luna desperately tries to protest, refusing to let him face the danger without her. Suddenly, a violent tremor shakes the entire cavern, forcing both of them to look up, as Colin braces himself for the inevitable return of their relentless burning enemy. Floating down through the smoke, the possessed warrior mocks their pathetic struggle from above, laughing maniacally at their foolish belief that they could ever hope to defeat him. Colin stands his ground as the armored giant lands heavily on the shattered stone floor, but his eyes suddenly widen in shock as a low growling echoes from the darkness, revealing a massive horde of glowing, green-eyed zombie minions swarming out of the shadows, leaving the legendary swordsman to raise his blade, swearing to end our hero once and for all. As the burning puppet descends from above, a massive horde of swarming minions surrounds our heroes, forcing Colin to quickly channel his frozen ice magic to prepare a defensive spell, conjuring a massive wall of frost to block the monster's incoming fiery strike. But the legendary swordsman easily shatters the barrier with a single devastating swing. Thick steam instantly fills the chamber, hiding the beast's movements as Colin looks around in concern, turning to tell Luna to retreat only to find her standing silently in the shadows, before she suddenly leaps forward and bites him directly on the neck with terrifying force, leaving our boy completely paralyzed with shock as he realizes the parasite has taken her over. Tears stream down Luna's face as she weakly apologizes for losing control of her own body, while the possessed warrior cackles from the darkness, revealing he is pulling her strings like a puppet, mocking Colin's useless medicine for only prolonging their inevitable and agonizing demise. A sudden shockwave blasts Colin backward, forcing him to cough up blood as the monster demands submission. This flaming giant slowly marches forward, confidently declaring that the battle is already decided, leaving our hero flat on his back while his compromised companion stands over him cold-mindedly, him of the exact same despair the original owner of this body once felt. But suddenly, massive purple spider legs burst violently out of the golden warrior's chest. A giant web instantly wraps around the screaming puppet, trapping him in a massive cocoon, which rapidly spreads across the entire stone chamber to completely seal off any escape, hanging Colin upside down while the true monster pins the golden warrior's head to the floor, revealing a sinister, fanged grin as the creature promises to drain every last drop of his blood. The spider demon rejoices as she finally breaks free from her decaying host body. Meanwhile, back at the selection grounds, the onlookers watch the glowing portal screens with growing anxiety, wondering if Colin is actually going to survive the horrors lurking deep inside the labyrinth. But a purple-haired companion chugs her drink, completely unbothered by the tense atmosphere, laughing off their worries while insisting their friend can handle any threat without breaking a sweat. This blind confidence only leaves the silver-haired recruit sweating, highly doubting things are going that smoothly as the silent hall remains filled with floating screens that hide the brutal reality of the trial. Back in the dark cavern, Colin struggles inside a tight cocoon of thick, suffocating silk, completely at the mercy of the massive spider queen hovering triumphantly beneath her web. She roars in absolute ecstasy, her fangs bared as she prepares to feast on her helpless prey, declaring that his body will soon become the perfect nourishment for her entire parasitic clan. Yet even with her jaws inches from his face, our boy simply chuckles in amusement, mockingly pointing out that her precious clan is about to face a very sudden extinction, right before a massive blade violently impales the screaming monster from behind in a spray of green blood. Luna suddenly leaps into action, driving her sword deep into the beast to end this nightmare once and for all, leaving the spider demon shrieking in absolute disbelief that her mind control had somehow failed. Looking down with a cold smirk, the young girl reveals she was only faking her possession, explaining that the entire act was a calculated trap to lure the parasite out of her host. With her dual blades drawn, Luna channels a massive surge of energy to execute her ultimate technique, unleashing a devastating storm of 100 rending slashes that tears the horrific beast to absolute shreds. Colin flashes a confident smirk as he easily maneuvers through the chaotic battlefield, pinning the screaming monster's head directly to the stone floor with absolute precision, leaving the beast to curse humanity's cowardice while writhing in agonizing defeat. Though its desperate claims of immortality do absolutely nothing to sway our hero, Colin casually lifts the severed head by its hair, completely unfazed by its empty threats, readying his dagger to put an end to this pathetic display of false godhood, forcing the terrified creature to finally face the brutal reality of its impending demise. With a swift motion, he drives his blade straight through the parasite's skull, sending a violent spray of acidic green blood across the cold stone floor. Instantly, the surrounding horde of zombie minions begins to convulse and scream in agony, shattering into harmless piles of bone as their master's life force completely fades away. Luna stands amidst the falling debris, her face splattered with the monster's foul blood, muttering in sheer disgust as she tries to shake off the sticky green residue, though she quickly recovers her composure, looking back at her companion with quiet relief. Colin can only stare in mild disbelief at her incredibly casual attitude toward the mess, while the young girl proudly boasts about how useful her acting skills turned out to be. Deciding to ignore her bragging, our boy simply turns and tells her to keep moving, leading the way down a dark torchlit corridor stretching deep into the ancient ruins. They soon reach what appears to be a dead end, but Colin points out a hidden room, leaving Luna highly confused as to why they are going deeper now that her parasite is gone. Our hero casually explains that they need to keep moving forward to pass this selection test, leaving Luna completely baffled as she tries to process his sudden change of plans. But her confusion turns to awe when he slides open a hidden stone wall, revealing a blinding golden light that spills out from the secret chamber ahead. Colin cryptically mentions that this room holds a crucial key to their ultimate goal, prompting the young girl to gasp in shock as they finally step inside, finding themselves standing before a massive glittering treasury overflowing with endless piles of gold. Sparkling chests and priceless jewels are scattered everywhere, practically begging to be looted, which instantly sends Luna into a state of absolute money-hungry hysteria at the sight of it. This swordsman explains that while this trial selects the family heir, it also hides their deepest secrets, recalling how he only stumbled upon this place by pure luck in his previous life. He unrolls an ancient parchment, realizing it is a detailed map of the mysterious dust-steeped forest, covered in bizarre markings and ominous symbols that hint at a much darker power. Staring intensely at the map, Colin remembers a chilling, starving voice from his past, confirming that a massive, terrifying secret is indeed waiting for him in those woods, making him even more determined to pass this test so he can finally investigate. Suddenly his eyes catch on something incredibly out of place amidst the glittering gold. Spotting a plain, dusty cloth pouch sitting right next to a legendary shield, our boy lifts the cheap-looking bag, highly skeptical of why it is hidden here, only for a brilliant glowing blue magic circle to suddenly burst to life from within. Colin realizes the dusty pouch is actually a legendary magic tool capable of storing any item. Standing in the middle of the massive treasury, he stares at the endless storage pouch in disbelief, which instantly brings a wicked, greedy smirk to his face as a brilliant plan forms. But his thoughts are interrupted when Luna suddenly runs up, shouting his name in a panic, frantically explaining that she has searched everywhere and can't find the heir's ring at all. Our boy looks back at her with a calm, completely unbothered expression on his face, casually asking whoever told her that the trial's ring was hidden in this room, before instructing her to just gather a few of the brightest, most glowing gems instead. This sudden request leaves the young girl completely dumbfounded as she tries to understand his logic. Clutching a handful of sparkling, colorful crystals, she highly doubts these are the key to passing, but she quickly hides her hesitation when Colin turns around to ask if something is wrong. Following him out of the treasury, she nervously asks what their next move is going to be, prompting our hero to confidently declare that they are going to find the ring now, only to cheerfully admit he has absolutely no idea where it actually is. Before she can lose her mind, he smirks and mentions he knows a certain professional, someone who specializes in tracking down rare and hidden treasures within these dangerous ruins. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, a massive tree is sliced cleanly in half with a single strike, as Colin relentlessly trains his swordsmanship, summoning spectral blue illusions of his past self to practice. Yet, looking down at his ordinary blade, he sighs in frustration at another failed attempt, realizing that no matter how hard he tries, he still cannot recreate that legendary golden sword. Colin recalls Phoenix, the heretic noble who abandoned magic to walk the path of the sword, analyzing the ancient magic tome to find any spells that might explain the warrior's power, realizing that these high-tier spells should have been completely impossible for Phoenix to cast. Even Colin's own sword energy clone is a cheap imitation compared to that legendary warrior's afterimage, leaving our boy wondering what kind of dark trick was used to bypass those magical limits. Then he remembers the mysterious pouch, which the system identifies as an unactivated pocket dimension, requiring a special blood mark to unlock its true legendary storage potential. He grimaces at the thought of feeding his own blood to a creepy, ancient artifact, but a sudden realization flashes in his mind as he connects the dots, remembering how Phoenix used blood to fuel his own impossible godlike techniques. Activating the magic circle, Colin prepares to test this theory by channeling his energy, drawing his blade to see if the blood sacrifice actually unlocks a hidden power, only to be suddenly interrupted by a loud voice echoing through the quiet woods. He quickly spins around as heavy footsteps approach him from the shadows of the forest, revealing Luna waving a bright torch while cheerfully calling out to her companion. Colin sighs in relief, casually asking how her little errand went while sheathing his weapon. She proudly boasts about hiding the glowing gems in all the exact spots he requested, before noticing his exhausted state and asking what he was doing out here alone, prompting our boy to smirk and tell her he was just practicing his swordsmanship, which becomes hilariously obvious as she looks around at the massive, cleanly sliced tree trunks. Luna looks around the desolate forest, highly skeptical that any professional actually lives in such a creepy place. Suddenly, a loud rustling in the bushes makes her swing her torch around in a total panic, while Colin remains completely unfazed, calmly watching the shadows as his companion frantically asks what just happened. Grabbing her hand to steady the flame, our boy smirks and tells her that their target has finally arrived. He tosses the burning torch onto a cluster of glowing blue crystals, trapping their mysterious guest in place. Squealing in frustration, a tiny pig with glowing red eyes finds itself completely stuck amidst the magical barrier, leaving Luna to stare in absolute disbelief that this adorable creature is supposedly their legendary treasure hunter. Turns out this little guy is a rare gem pig, a monster famous for hoarding priceless underground riches. Standing quietly in the clearing, the duo observes the legendary beast as it wriggles in the dirt, prompting the young girl to suddenly recall its incredible sense of smell for locating deep underground treasures. Yet, because these creatures are incredibly timid, finding one in the wild is considered an absolute miracle. Unable to resist its cuteness, Luna kneels down and tries to gently pet the legendary beast, only for the tiny pig to aggressively bare its fangs, instantly making her back away in fear. Though she quickly laughs it off, reminding Colin that planting those bait gems was definitely worth the effort. Our hero silently agrees, reflecting on how much easier this trial is compared to his brutal previous life. Looking back at him, the pink-haired girl skeptically asks if this tiny animal can actually find the ring, which Colin confidently confirms before crouching down to get on the creature's eye level. Whispering to the trembling pig, he reassures the little beast that they simply want to make a deal, promising to release it immediately from the crystal trap if it helps them locate the hidden heirloom, before showing a pouch overflowing with sparkling gems to prove he has no intention of asking for free favors. Colin holds out the handful of sparkling gems, offering them as a reward to the trapped beast, explaining that they looted every single treasure from the corpse puppet Mother Bug's nest and promises the little creature a 10% cut if it helps them find the ring. Refusing the offer immediately, the stubborn pig violently shakes its head in absolute disapproval, before suddenly leaning forward to bite down on the sparkling crystals in Colin's hand. Our hero freezes in pure shock, completely caught off guard by the animal's bold move, only for the greedy beast to spit the gems back out onto the dirt in disgust. Colin immediately loses his temper, yelling that they risked their lives to gather those precious stones, holding up 2 fingers as he firmly declares that 20% is his absolute final offer. This tiny pig gives him a smug, calculating look, clearly weighing its options in this negotiation. Satisfied with the new terms, the creature bows its head deeply toward the scattered gems, leaving our swordsman to quietly wonder if this gesture means they finally have a deal. With a sharp snap of his fingers, Colin shatters the crystal trap to release his new partner. This little pig squeals happily, instantly scrambling up the young man's leg with surprising speed, before settling onto his shoulder as Colin turns to ask Luna if she remembers the heirloom's design. She looks back at him with a highly hesitant expression, confirming she does but remaining skeptical. Our boy explains that this legendary beast can actually sniff out the target directly from her memories, prompting the nervous girl to quickly suggest that the pig should sniff his head instead. Colin laughs it off, secretly panicking because letting it read his past life would ruin everything, forcing Luna to reluctantly lean forward so the tiny treasure hunter can begin its work. This tiny beast sniffs Luna's face, making her sweat as she desperately tries to stay still, until its eyes suddenly widen with absolute determination, having successfully locked onto the target's scent. And without warning, the little pig bolts into the dark woods, leaving the duo behind. It dashes through the thick undergrowth at lightning speed, kicking up dirt as it leads the way, while Colin keeps a close eye on its path as it suddenly leaps high into the trees, landing gracefully on a thick branch to look back at its new business partners. Staring up at the creature, our boy instantly realizes what the clever beast is trying to show him, pointing them directly toward a massive, glowing volcano erupting in the distance.